Hello.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here
Thank
for
our
our
improv
pivot to video.
our
Our
improv
improv.
comedy show.
No, no, never. I'm no, like after doing like sketch comedy and stuff like that here for a few years, I was anti-comedy for a while. Just
Did you actually participate in sketch comedy?
yeah, I was in like a group where we like wrote little sketches and we did this we did like the festivals around here and stuff like that. And
I did
yeah.
not know that.
Yeah, it was for a couple of years. And then we entered the post-Trump era where everybody was just writing please clap kind of comedy bits that were not funny at all.
As the anime sickos, that evil, evil.
Point at the thing and say evil.
Yeah,
Yep, exactly. So,
we really thought comedy was gonna get better, and it just didn't. It got
oh
worse.
yeah. Yeah, because I remember people being like, Obama is the death of comedy because there's nothing about him you can make fun of, or like whatever. I remember people saying that back then. And then Trump people were like, oh, it's the death of comedy because everything's too bleak and you can't, you know, distinguish between reality and jokes. Oh man, 31 viewers now. Hell yeah. Hello, everyone.
Oh, I see. For 42.
42, damn, okay. Hi.
Okay.
Um, Can everybody use the chat? I had to like fuck around with the features to make sure it's possible to use the chat even if you're not verified. I guess I should check that again.
Oh, I can actually see. I just realized that I can actually see a list of everybody.
Okay. Oh yeah, cool. Yeah, people are saying hi. Hello, hi. Great, thank you. Thank you for testing that.
And also, please let us know how the levels are and stuff. This is our first real stream. We did a test stream yesterday, very brief test stream yesterday. But other than that, we're both very new to the Twitcher net. Um,
Yes. It didn't go well, Eric. Bans my own mod.
I mean, I think it went really well.
Yes.
I put.
It went great. Oh, yes. Ooh. Oh my god. Oh, yes.
It's really
This is so
good.
good. It looks so good. Oh my god. S- So before we dive in, do you want to tell people the Spirit Halloween
Oh,
uh
yeah, that's
story of how what we're talking about getting jobs
yes, that's a
and
great story. Um,
yes.
so basically, um, first of all, my name is Madeline. Many of you
Oh
probably
yeah.
don't know who I am. I am,
But you will.
yes, I'm a friend of Devin's. Been friends for a while now, and I'm basically here as producer Madeline. So, gonna be, here chatting and stuff, and I'm also the one streaming and everything. So, if the stream is bad, you can blame me.
None
Um,
of this would be possible without her because I'm incompetent and my computer's slow. So all of this is her, especially aesthetics.
um, oh, good luck to your son. Lori loves
Yeah,
Prince. That's
yeah,
so exciting. Um,
yeah,
what is the job?
yeah. I hope it's one of his first. Oh, he's probably nervous, but
Aw.
it's good practice. Job interview. Oh God, that could be a whole conversation unto itself. How fucked job interviews are.
Yeah.
God damn, I should have probably put that in the piece. Fuck. Okay, well.
On call phlebotomy. Oh, I
Ooh,
misunderstood on call as over the phone. It's like how do you
I wish.
how do you
I
do that?
wish.
Oh,
Oh.
that's great.
Yeah, I know some trans mask phlebotomists. Oddly enough, if he could, because I just found out this morning that my hemoglobin levels are too high, and I'm really freaking out about it.
Oh,
So if he could like fake uh, a good test for me, that would be good.
yeah.
Because I literally told my nurse today like I'm fine with a higher blood clot risk. Just let it.
Oh no.
I don't-
Um
Anyway.
yeah. So please please, everybody, feel free to tell, kind of just be putting stuff in the chat. Um, there's a delay, so I'll definitely come back to stuff as we go on. So I will tell that story before it gets away from us. So the what I was gonna say is I am not autistic. I am ADHD. Um, although like almost everyone else in my family is ADHD, or excuse me, autistic. But I am ADHD, which is sort of my perspective on work uh, in this context. And so I was leaving school, and I was like, I should check in on my friend who's working at Halloween City. And this friend is autistic, actually. And wouldn't you know it, realized it by reading your book, Devin.
Got another one.
Yeah. um, but so yeah, I just stopped in, um, and it was a absolute shit show. I had worked at a Spirit Halloween a few years prior to this, so I was familiar with it, and I've worked a lot of retail. And so it was like them and like two other employees or something in and then like the general manager. Apparently, when my friend Joe had got in that morning, the general manager brought them in and was like, "So, I just want to let you know I'm quitting and I'm not telling management. So I just won't be here tomorrow. I just want to let you, I'm not telling management, but I just want to let you know up front so you know." And they were like, okay, because apparently people hadn't been fucking getting their checks, of course. Seasonal shit is like a total shit show.
Makes
But
sense.
it was like, it was such like like, it was just a beautiful train wreck. And so I was just kind of hanging out, and I'd done the work before. So I was like, do you want me to help? And I just sort of was, because I was just hanging out with my friend, but I was like putting stock out on the floor, which is like, not that, as someone who had done retail, it wasn't that hard to figure out like this thing goes with the other things like it. Um, so I was just hanging out for a while. My phone was dying, so I charged it in the back right next to the office. My dad called just to ask what was going on, and just to say hi. And so I was like, yeah, I told him what was going on, and I was like, yeah, I was thinking about like applying here just for shits because it's such a train wreck, and I could probably just get the job really easily. And the manager who was sitting in there probably doing like nothing, um, she overheard me and she was like, do you want a job? I'm quitting. I can just give it to you. So
The manager. The
the general
manager.
manager, yes. And
Yes.
so she was literally like, yeah, sure, just fill this out, and if anyone asks, I tell them that I interviewed you. Because that
Oh
would be
my
really bad
god.
that I didn't actually interview you. So yeah, then I worked there for most of the season. Um, and and then my mental health got bad, and so I hit the bricks. left
Hit the
before,
bricks.
left before the season was over because my mental health was bad, which is an important thing to do for yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes. Hit the bricks. My weirdest job acquisition story was at 13. We all heard, that if you show up at the fairgrounds, at the county fairgrounds, at like 6 a.m. the day that they're setting up, you can get a job working at the fair. So me and two friends of mine, we showed up and we're just stomping around in the dirt talking to carnival workers saying we want a job, and they like take us from like trailer to trailer. Everybody's asleep or like smoking and just like getting set up, and eventually we find some guy with this huge like mustache, redhead mustache, trucker hat,
Oh my
and
god.
he hired us. And again, 13 years old, no paperwork. It was like $250 for the whole week,
Oh
and it
my
was
god.
like 12-hour days, which legally, at that age, I think you're not allowed to work at all.
Yeah, in
But even
Michigan
as a
there's a
minor,
curfew, I think. Like you can't
yeah,
work after a certain time.
yeah, and you're supposed to only be able to work like 4 hours. But I would just work next to the spinning barrel on the funhouse for 12 hours, just listening to music on my Walkman, and just like if anybody did a handstand, I had to just hit a button to make the barrel stop spinning, and I just did that.
Oh my god.
And we also bought our first weed
Oh,
from the guy who hired us. So that was a great time.
that's amazing.
Okay, all right. So let's dive in. So everybody, I was inspired to kind of do this event based on other live streams like Philosophy Tube, the way that she does little post mortem streams for her YouTube videos, kind of like talking through the topic further and like kind of engaging with the chat. And I also just really like talking to people on Instagram Live a couple weeks ago. So I thought we could kind of just talk through the article that I wrote on workplace self advocacy and career discernment, and kind of also just kind of talk with you guys about your own kind of tips and tricks and how you've kind of made decisions about um, you know, when to leave a job, how to get away with doing the minimum at a job in order to keep it, and just kind of talk through those kinds of strategies because people really shared a lot of great ideas when I was kind of crowdsourcing ideas for this article. So we can kind of just talk about that stuff. Happy to kind of take and respond to any questions in the chat, or ideas and examples as people kind of pepper them in. And then, if we have time, depending on how things go, we can also talk about social media, news, and there's some all kinds of fuckery going on here in Chicago as well that we can also talk about. So there's lots to
Yes.
kind of.
We're always happy to gossip about discourse.
Yes, yes. I always have. There's so much to say, and now that I don't post as much, there's even more to say. Um, oh, Eric, my regional manager at Spirit was super conservative. Raises and minimum wage are bad. Got caught stealing tons of merchandise. And it's like, how could someone with such shitty beliefs do something so cool? Oh, so my mom's a dental hygienist, and she worked at this office for like, I'll start my screen share. She worked at this dental office for like 20 years, and can see that I was searching for very important things, everyone. And then she found out that the front desk person, who had also been working there like 13 years or something like that, had just been pocketing anytime anybody paid cash for any procedure at the dentist's office. She just took that cash, just
Oh my
completely like,
god.
if somebody paid for an appointment, if people bought like whitening strips, anything. And like it only came to light one day when she was like sick, and whoever was like covering the desk for her was like, she asked the dentist like, if somebody pays cash, what do we do with that? And he's like, people pay cash.
You can cash is legal tender?
Cash, people pay for dental services with cash. And
Ah,
it was like, and she got like, I can't remember if they like settled out of court or what, but we're talking like $30,000,
oh god.
um, which was pretty based of her.
Very, very based. I can't actually see your screen share. I feel like I heard a little
Oh,
bloop
yeah.
when you
Let me
started it.
try. I did it a different way. I did like share a window rather than share my whole screen. So let me try share entire screen.
That's so weird. I'm hearing a bloop, but I'm not seeing it. I think it might be something on my end. Oh, there we go. That's strange. Okay. Apparently, if you say show non-video participants, it doesn't show the little thing that you click to watch stream, which is weird.
Oh, weird.
Anyway,
Okay. So now it's working.
it is working now, yes.
Beautiful. All right. Yeah. Okay. I see Faye Gale said in the chat, it would be really cool if there's time to talk more about career discernment. I feel like I spend a lot of time paralyzed and feeling like I can't job hunt because there are too many options, but they all seem bad. Well,
Yeah.
that's that. They are all bad, is what
Yeah.
Eric just said. Yeah, they are all bad. I studied like five different things in school and ended up just out of grad school and not doing much. Oh, yeah. Okay. Oh, Lord. Oh, yeah. No.
I mean, the like the brass tacks of all of this is like we should be overthrowing capitalism instead of doing any of this, but that's not
hmm
realistic. So like, yeah, absolutely, it's all bad.
It's all bad. Yeah, and that's important to emphasize right out the gate. They are all bad. They all are going to try to exploit you. So then it's about like how do you collect the information you can collect to figure out is this the kind of place that I can get away with what I need to get away with to like get rest and, not be stressed out about my job all of the time. Like I think that's really for me at least one of the big litmus tests is just trying to get a gauge of like how much are they micromanaging me at this workplace and in this field in general. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, and I think some of that stuff you only figure out, unfortunately, once you start somewhere. Kind of take the vibe check.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. Maddie, what do you kind of like when you're like starting at some place? What's the vibe check for you
So
when you're trying to figure
one
out?
thing that I have done, and I don't really know, and so and I think my work has been pretty like I've only worked retail, only worked entry level stuff basically, with kind of rare exceptions. But one thing I I I do is if if the employees have tattoos, I think of like specifically with queer stuff. I feel like I'm more likely like people are there's more likely to be like leeway. Like there's less likely to be this weird professionalism kind of thing that can a lot of times, exclude people based on, you know, gender identity and queerness, and then also, ableism and racial stuff, because, the ideal professional worker is like an able-bodied white straight man. um
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, so tattoos are like that is like sort of one thing. um I have looked I really like working for small businesses. There's definitely downsides to it, and I've definitely been taken advantage of, but it it feels like a more manageable like thing. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, yeah, those are some of the things that I've done to and when it's retail, I just go there, and kind of see what the vibe is.
Yeah, the tattoo thing is such a good litmus test, like of just how rigid, like just makes me immediately think of how Disney for many years had the most like rigid. You couldn't have more than one ear piercing, you couldn't wear any interesting color of makeup. Like it just reflects like how sanitized of a corporate image a company's going for versus if they either don't give a shit or if they see it as like a positive for their brand, which is something that somebody mentioned that I quote in this article. Someone saying that like if you're autistic and you come across as kind of aloof, maybe find a coffee shop where there's a lot of people with tattoos and like being a kind of a frosty barista is like considered desirable rather than like having to smile and be chipper all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely one thing I heard people recommend, which was, I mean, again, it's still you're still going to be treated like shit a lot of the time, but
Yeah.
if there's less of a culture of having to like do fake smiles all the time,
Yeah.
that can be a big energy save for sure. Oh, and Molna, yeah, I was about to just say what Lori Love Prince basically just said. So Molna is talking about how they applied to 46 jobs on Indeed, and most weren't even viewed. And yeah, a lot of that stuff is automated.
Yeah.
So that means a lot of things just like it just never even gets through um, to you. Um, so I don't know. I don't know how long Indeed, especially with the like job market being the way it is, how long that's gonna continue to be something that companies can even do
Yeah.
because it's just so.
Hopefully the job market continues to get better, but I don't know. I'm not an economics person, but it seems like people are intentionally trying to fuck up, like, the make it harder for people to get jobs and shit because inflation.
Well, yeah, and it's just like this big protest that a lot of like companies are having where they are just they're resisting the reality so fucking hard
Yeah.
that a lot of the labor force has died or become disabled. A lot of people are not willing to put their life on the line for jobs that treat them like shit anymore. And so, like there's just so much like there should be more desperation to hire people, but a lot of companies are doing everything they can to kind of deny that reality. Um, so we just need to like hold firm as much as we can and keep like, to the extent a person can, just like
Yeah.
quitting shitty jobs, walking away. Okay, let's dive into this bad boy a little bit because I think a lot of it kind of dovetails with things people are saying in the chat. So, for those of you who don't know, I have this series on Medium, Autistic Advice, where I just kind of respond to questions. And anytime I do get Tumblr asks or had my Curious Cat box open or DMs open, the questions that people send me are overwhelmingly about work. People message me about their work frustrations and these dynamics so often because capitalism is horrible and because most workplaces are just completely inaccessible, and the social norms of them are just really, really difficult for neurodivergent people. So it makes sense that a lot of people reach out about this stuff. So, so this is the question that I got. Curious if you've written or have any insight regarding working while autistic. I'm a recent grad struggling to navigate meltdowns at work, social cues, and information overload, even though most of my job is remote. Already such a privilege and asset, but still not enough. Um, do you have any advice for autistics, especially autistics new to unmasking, about career discernment, advocating for accommodations, and even knowing when to leave your job? So I, inspired by this and just getting such a large volume of questions because this is just a huge factor in most disabled people's lives. I tried to pull together as many resources as I could kind of put together from my own knowledge and strategies, as well as things that people work in more customer facing kind of work had to say. So it kind of comes down to, well, just walk out and leave, first of all. Hit, first of all, quit.
Yeah. Hit the bricks.
Hit the bricks.
We're gonna get buttons that like I can just press and like memes will just like things like this will pop up. I think this needs to once I have that ability, this just needs to like be a permanent like people are gonna ask questions like my job sucks and I just need to have a button that's just like hit the bricks.
Hit the bricks. You can leave.
Yeah.
But this is also true of social things, things that
Yeah.
suck. But if you can hit the bricks, often knowing when to hit the bricks is like one of the biggest distinguishing factors, I think, for quality of life for people. But of course, a lot of times people don't have the option. But I think a lot of us that are millennials, especially, we have it conditioned to our brain that we don't have the option,
Yeah.
even when sometimes we do.
Yeah.
So
I think
learning to discern that difference.
and just I think the social part of like people being more like recognizing like a company is not going to reward you for 25 years of loyalty like
Mm-hmm.
um and so that helps that and just reinforcing those things in your own brain
Mm-hmm.
because it's scary.
Yeah, it's really scary. It's not irrational to be really nervous about this stuff, and like it's hard to disengage from that fear because it is a like whether you can, earn enough money to feed and house yourself is a life and death matter. So it's not irrational to find it really hard to stand up for yourself.
Yeah.
Um, but as Eric said in the chat, job growth has remained rigidly stubborn these last few quarters.
God. Yeah.
So you have a lot more power than you realize,
Especially right now.
unfortunately, right now. Yeah. So calling the bluff of employers, and also when it's the kind of place where it's worth putting that time in, talking to your coworkers and collectively bargaining and walking out together. Um, that takes a lot more work, right? Like unionizing takes a lot more work than just quitting, and sometimes you want to just quit, and that's cool too because that still changes the equation for
Yeah.
other people that come after you.
Yeah.
So,
I am currently unemployed and I got totally fed up with my job and very much wanted to unionize and like it was a small enough place that I like had enough people, But at the end of the day, I realized like actually my problem with this job is not the money, which is like kind of the easy thing, not easy, but like easiest thing to change with that kind
Mm-hmm.
of thing because it's like demonstrable. But I realized the thing that pissed me off was just that the job pissed me off, and that wasn't gonna like it was gonna get worse because they were gonna be mad at me. So it's like,
Right.
even though it would have been better for, it would have been good in a lot of ways, like to do that unionization push. It was like at the end of the day that wasn't gonna benefit me, and it's like there's lots of different things like that.
Right. Yeah, yeah, and you don't, you don't owe a company loyalty of any kind, and that even means not owing it like any like attempt to make it better
Yeah,
if it's not worth it, you know?
yeah, and
Like,
and unfortunately you don't owe that to your fellow workers because I think as much as we need to have solidarity and stuff like that, and that stuff is so important. Jobs use guilt to keep you there. You know, the classic
mm-hmm,
like you need to come in because it's going to hurt your coworkers. And it's like actually you're hurting your employees by not having enough people to cover when and not having the leeway, and that you know empathy for your coworkers is like so often weaponized. And knowing that
mm-hmm.
like at Halloween City, like I knew that like it was going to be harder for my coworkers to close up because corporate didn't give them the support to, like there wasn't enough manpower to fucking close the store because I didn't give a shit. And I knew
Mm-hmm.
I felt really bad because I knew I was leaving people in the lurch. But like my mental health was super fucking bad at that point. I ended up like having like definitely like a mental health episode shortly after that. And it's like, you know
Yeah.
at the end of the day, it's corporate's responsibility to take care of their employees. It's not your responsibility to take care of your coworkers. You don't have that power.
Right. Yes. Remember who the enemy is. This would be like if you work in like any kind of like low tier management role, like if you're just fed up with your coworkers. This happens in nonprofits, it happens in any kind of shift work where there's like constantly fires to put out. Like they're going to try and make you think that you have to be busting your ass all of the time, and that if you call in sick, you're responsible for there being a hole. And this is even a problem even in some cushier like office jobs that are more comfortable for a lot of people. A lot of people feel like they can't ever even take a vacation
Yeah.
in any of these kinds of roles because, oh, everything's going to fall apart without me. I have to do so much work to set people up to be okay while I'm gone. But if your employer is that understaffed that you being sick, that you not being able to come, when you're called, when you weren't even scheduled to pick up a shift, or you taking a vacation or sick leave is going to make everything crumble, they're not putting enough resources into the company, and that's their fault. And of course, there's always going to be some coworkers who have like drunk the like hierarchy, like poison, and are going to blame you for it. But don't be one of those people, like Sinead O'Connor voice, fight the real enemy. Like,
Oh, uh,
and I think that's really huge. Like, if you just stop resenting your other coworkers, even like the people that seem like they're lazy or they're not doing enough, they're never the enemy. No matter what, they're not the source of your problem. It's higher ups, it's a lack of support, it's not having enough resources, it's not paying people enough, it's not having enough employees. That's the problem. And it's okay for these things to completely collapse. Like, who gives a fuck? Like, if the coffee shop can't open that day.
yeah.
Okay, perennial rants. Okay,
Yeah.
so yeah, so in this article I'm kind of talking about both like career discernment, which is like the higher order question of how do you decide whether working in a certain line of work is going to be doable for you, in general, like is being an academic, is working in food service, is working in sales, whatever it is, going to be something that you can make work, if you find the right place and the right exploits. and really just kind of collecting candid information about what a field is like. And then the kind of second bucket is once you've kind of put yourself in a line of work or you're pursuing it, what are the things you can do on the ground day by day to make yourself look like you're really productive, but without actually busting your ass? Get really, positive performance evaluations that are going to protect you to whatever extent that's possible. And, how are you going to just diplomatically keep yourself from being exploited any more than you have to be, not taking on extra duties or other people's jobs and things like that. Let me see. There's some stuff in the chat I think that I want to talk about though before we dive into some of these examples.
Yeah. Thank you guys for all of your great anecdotes, I guess you could say. Um, trying to keep up with all of them.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I did want to circle back to something that is it Horse Girl left in the chat. Ever since I started including my pronouns and referring to myself as disabled in my cover letter, I haven't been getting invited to even be interviewed in higher ed environments.
Yeah.
Yeah, um, you know, and I'm like I see a lot of this stuff developing just because of the workshops that I get invited to do by different employers. More and more employers are saying that they care about neurodiversity and disability the same way they used to say and still say that they care about racial equity. They don't care about those things. You can't trust them, and you can't trust them with any sensitive information um, that they could potentially discriminate you against you with.
Yeah.
Um,
But I also understand like putting that stuff in because I definitely understand like you want to get that out there so you don't have to show up to an interview and have somebody treat you like shit. Like it's the same thing where like, I make sure like I don't have like a passable voice. Like my face is definitely way more passable than my voice. So I like in dating profiles, I put I have like a deep voice. I haven't done voice work because I don't want to show up to a date and have somebody be really surprised and upset about my voice. And
mhm.
so I understand the uh I don't know wanting to put that stuff in there so you don't. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it's true. It depends on a person's situation and how selective I think they can afford to be
Yeah.
with work. Because yeah, I think a lot of employers, unfortunately, even though it's illegal, that doesn't actually mean that it's legally actionable. Places discriminate against disabled people all the time, and
We'll get
most
to a really
lawsuits. Yeah.
really good website in a bit that is really upsetting.
Oh God, yeah, yeah.
We'll get to
These
that later.
yeah, and I just say this because so people know. So I think sometimes you have to decide based on your situation, am I going to disclose my disability and I can be more selective? Like I can handle, only getting like a tenth of the job interviews I would get if I didn't identify myself as disabled. Um, or, am I going to not disclose my disability and either find kind of like sneaky ways to get the accommodations that I need, or broach the topic later, or just never bring it up. Um, it's certainly something that I never disclosed in a work environment. Though obviously now at work, people obviously know. But
Yeah, and that totally
um,
depends on when you're talking about disability. That definitely depends on your disability and like you know.
mhm. Right. Yeah, yeah. If you're a wheelchair user, like, and you need a physically accessible environment, it does
Yeah.
seem like something where just putting it in the cover letter, and unfortunately seeing how terrible the response rate is probably the right strategy versus, autism or ADHD or um, Tourette's or something, or OCD, something that, they can't necessarily see immediately, and, depending on the work environment and things like that.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I think every single retail store I've ever been in, every I don't think I've had a single job that was uh wheelchair accessible. Like
Hmm.
actively wheelchair accessible like well. and I saw that when I worked at a clothes store, and it was like this older building, and it was like it had like a front area, and then there were steps that went up, and it was so upsetting because there was a lift, but
Mm-hmm.
it was like this horrible contraption that literally took 500 years to go up, and the key was never accessible. It was always somewhere weird, so I always had to like go find the manager, and they would have to use the key, and then it's like it was like absolute nightmare. And that's for like customers, like not even going
Right.
into like if someone had tried to apply there in a wheelchair, or in some like mobility, like with some kind of mobility. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
Molna. That, yeah, that, and that's on top of like at that particular store. This was like a clothes fashion store. Like, I I didn't feel like I would be comfortable navigating that store if I was a bigger person, like let alone a wheelchair user.
Mm-hmm.
Like that shit is
Right.
so normalized, and that's even for customers, even for people who are gonna give them money, they don't
Right.
make it easy.
Yeah, yeah. Wheelchair users are just like treated as like invisible, and it's this feedback loop where they can't participate in public life, so then people don't see the need to make things accessible for them because they never see wheelchair users in their business because they can't get in.
Yeah,
And I think I will say that's one thing where small businesses tend to suck more,
that's true.
because they usually have like smaller, older buildings that might have ADA exemptions because they're historic or something, or because
Yeah.
they're a small business. Corporate tends to be a little tiny bit more likely to have accessible, physically accessible spaces, just only as a cover their ass kind of legal,
Yeah, they have
factor.
just because they have a higher liability if something happens. It's just because they're bigger, there's more chances that someone will actually go, you know, successfully sue them.
Right. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, like almost every like small business here in Chicago, there's a step to get inside, at
Yeah.
least one. Everything's narrow and small. And
And then that's
yeah.
not even all that. Most of the time for a small business, that's not even necessarily their fault. Like I know at the place that I worked at, that I loved, like we had a fucking awful landlord, and there were so many things that were inaccessible, but like we didn't have power over fixing them. Like,
Hmm.
so
Yeah. Yeah. So that's definitely a huge factor. Yeah. Okay, so career discernment. One of the first things that I kind of say if you're just trying to figure out is this career path the right one for me, especially because the person who wrote this question initially was an academic. Talk to people who are have been deemed by people in the field or the line of work as the failures, the people who have left, the people who have quit a job at a particular store. They will, if you have any of those connections, like look at the Glassdoor reviews from people that like have quit. You know a company or an organization will always portray those people as like bitter and biased and not having what it took to succeed. But the people who have left a field of work or left a workplace see and can articulate the most clearly everything that's wrong with that institution.
yeah.
um,
Just we are going to. There's going to be a VOD for on Twitch, a video on demand on Twitch for, I don't know if it's 7 or 14 days right now, and
mhm.
then we will
I'll put it
like.
on YouTube too.
Okay, for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah. So
Yeah.
just to answer that question.
Yeah. Yeah. We will definitely save the video on this and post a link to it. Um, yeah. So, like, an example of this that just happened is there's a concert venue here in Chicago called The Hideout. And it's been very, like, beloved as, like, a Chicago institution for a really long time. And they had a booker, so somebody who did all the talent booking, um, who was like one of their first like black employees to ever be in any kind of leadership position. He was fired, I guess, earlier this year, and he just kind of uh, after really like advocating to get more support because he basically had to do all of the bookings, but he also had to like anytime a concert was happening, he had to like take check IDs at the door. He had to rearrange the chairs. He had to like help like sweep up. Like he had to do all of this like you know, on the ground like labor in addition to maintaining like the voicemail and the email inbox and the scheduling software and you know, there were a couple of times where people got double booked and he was kind of blamed for it and things like that. Um, and he kind of just I think it was last week wrote this post just kind of saying like I'm not available to talk in any more detail about this, but the hideout really had this toxic culture and did not accommodate me um, as a black man working here, and then they just fired me. And one of the owners like fired him like she was like on a Zoom. It was like over a Zoom. Like he was brought into the office and
God.
one of them was like on a Zoom call to like fire him.
God.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
and so now there's been a big push from the hideout to try and like discredit him and say that he didn't try hard enough to learn this booking software and
Oh my
you know,
God.
like
Yeah. He was
like
aggressive.
right,
the,
right.
the
Yeah, he was
classic, the classic with, especially with, you know,
yeah,
especially
with
with black
black
men
people.
and
Yeah.
black people in general, and yeah. Ugh.
Yeah. Yeah, and they did really say that like he was holding people emotionally hostage in the workplace by from all I can tell like when some bullshit was going down like he would just go down to the bar like if you've ever been to the hideout it's just like there's a bar right by the door and so I think he would just kind of like sit at the bar and like commiserate with other employees about things that were not working and that was him holding the
Oh,
place emotionally hostage.
oh my God.
Yeah, yeah. And so a lot of workplaces we have these fictions about that you're supposed to pretend to believe in about how inclusive a place is, what an important artistic institution it is, how much we're doing this research because we care about helping people, whatever it is. We're a family, and
Yeah, looking for rock stars. God.
we're looking for rock stars.
Yeah.
And so, if you can find and talk to people who have been burned by a place, you'll get a more honest point of view about it.
And
Because there's this.
Glassdoor is a great place for that. If it's the kind of place that will have Glassdoor reviews, like, that's going to be the people that are going to post on there generally. And,
Yes.
unless it's like, this is a great workplace, I love it here, then it's probably just the HR department.
Yes. I am Johnny Goodworker, and I love job.
the
I
this
love my work family.
the HR director is specifically handsome and cool.
And very normal and respectful of boundaries.
Ooh.
Uh, yeah. So that's something I highly recommend, and this is something where in academia there's just I think every graduate program's like this. Anybody that I know that went to graduate schools had this experience where um, they won't even acknowledge that you're a worker while you're there. Like you're an employee, you're paid like an employee, but they say you're a student, so you have like no
God.
worker protections
Yeah.
and no like keeping track even of how many hours you're working for that same stipend every week. And anybody who leaves is just not PhD material, um,
Yeah.
rather than it's just not an accessible environment.
Yeah. And those are things that you can, and things like that are totally things that you can be aware of when you're applying to places. Do they, um, like, it it does the interviewer seem happy to be there? Like,
Mm-hmm.
can if you are physically going into interview, if you can like scope out people and see what the vibe is, um, like, uh, and like you were saying, where like in that job it's like you're not even treated as a worker, you're like a student. Like another thing with that is like if you're on a 1099 instead of a like if you're being you're gonna get hired as a contractor instead of like an actual employee, like that shit, like that doesn't always mean that it's gonna be a bad job, but it's like, why are they doing that, why are they doing stuff like that,
Mm-hmm.
um, is definitely a thing to think about.
Yeah, and they won't give you this information, like when you're, for people who are like in college or like working on a degree and trying to kind of figure out a career path in that avenue, like they don't usually give you a realistic gauge of what the job prospects look like for a major or what the outcomes are for somebody who goes into a particular like line of work. And so, because it's a business, they're trying to get as many enrollments as possible in their classes.
Yeah.
And higher ed is like in crisis too. Like whenever the economy is better for the worker, the economy is worse for higher ed because if you can get a job, you don't need to go to college.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, so like that means that we're not always in speaking as an academic, we're not always honest and candid about whether or not taking classes in something is even going to result in you having any kind of if it maps onto any kind of job, So so that's something to kind of be skeptical about and then in addition to the stuff Maddie was just saying about look at how do they pay people, what's their structure, how do things work, and what are they not saying. Um, because once you learn to look out for some of the red flags, you can start to see places that are especially toxic for sure. Um, oh, I'm just noticing I put next door instead of glass door. Oh my god. Okay. Well,
I mean, you could probably sometimes you could probably find some stuff if it's a local business, you might be able to find that stuff in next door if you're lucky.
yeah. Oh god. I'll change that after this. Also, like anybody who's ever used the Medium like highlight and like private note feature to tell me I left a typo, thank you. You are my editor. I love you. But yeah, Molna, yeah, psychology, we're the worst at it. Psychology is a pyramid scheme because we because we need lots of undergrads as our subject pool because most of our studies are conducted on undergraduate psychology majors.
Oh
So we
God,
need
yeah.
lots of psychology majors for our data pool, and then we need lots of graduate students to help turn all that data into articles. And so that means we're putting out more and more degrees every year for fewer and fewer job prospects. Um, and it sucks. It sucks ass.
Yeah.
So it's good to know that's not, you know, it's good to know the reality.
Yeah.
Okay, next thing. Whatever workplace you're going into, temper your expectations. I think we kind of already talked about this. Like, don't fall for the we're a family, you're a rock star thing. Like,
My favorite thing about like the we're a family here is like who has a untraumatic family. Like it's such a wild thing because it's like the they're like and of course it's also the thing where it's like we're a family when I want you to come in and cover, but when I have to fire you for something stupid, well, we're a business. But it's also just
mm-hmm.
like, a families are like dysfunction almost dysfunctional by nature. Like it's not a good that's not a good even if it was the way they're saying it is, it's not good.
Right, yeah. We're a family here is like, oh, okay, so you're a really tight knit group that exerts coercive control to force conformity out of people and maintain the fiction that we're all happy and get along at all costs. Okay,
Yeah.
great. Yeah, that's what a family is, right? Okay, cool. um,
Zan
and also, if you, oh,
Oh, I
go
was
ahead.
just gonna say, Xander. Yeah, next door is a nightmare. Police your neighbors into infinity. Yeah, that's absolutely true. But
Yeah, next
regardless,
door is a hell zone of people just saying, "Oh, I saw a person of color walking in my neighborhood.
oh
I'm scared." Yeah, it's
God,
awful.
they were wearing a hood. Um,
Yes.
anyway,
Yes. But yes, so your work won't ever love you back, no matter, even if you actually do have a nice manager. Like, even if
yeah,
they're a nice person, they have, if they have the power to fire you or the power to really just kind of completely fuck up your position, that's a degree of coercive control that they have over you that's going to just always be hanging over your head. And that can change at a moment's notice, like even if they've been great up until this point, it can always change. So just never and I bring this one up because I think a lot of autistic people, the same way that we're really susceptible to cults and to abusive relationships, we're really susceptible to believing in the mission of an organization because we really want to find belonging and we're not used to being like told that we're doing a good job socially. So if an organization is telling us like, "Oh, you're doing great. We really value you," it's very seductive, um, and
Uh,
that can really be exploited.
I have a really good story to kind of illustrate that. I'll try to not take up too much time with it, but my previous job, it was a small, a previous job was a small business. It was an ice cream store that was extremely queer, um, and I loved it. You know, it was like very, it was like the whole idea. I mean, we talked about gentrification in my interview, like it's in a small, it's in like the like blacker, poorer part of the city that I live in, and you know he talked about the owner talked about how you know he wants to stay open all winter because you know it's like he doesn't want to have another empty business in during the winter in this area, and so we talked about stuff like that, and um, but and I really believed in the mission, and I really believed in what he was trying to do in a lot of ways, um, and but he also paid shit. Like I
Mm.
was a assistant manager, and I was getting paid like $11 an hour, and I was an assistant manager, and I was also doing it the event like event planning stuff, and um, and more what I realized is like he and I really think this guy was a really good person and had really good intents. But more and more, I just realized that, like, by being a manager, by being a business owner, he was like, the, the incentives are so fucked, which is just the whole, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that's the whole thing. Like, that's the whole capitalism thing, right? And it was
Yep.
like, so specifically, this place was really queer friendly. When I was working there, the majority of people were trans. Um, there was no one who was cis het straight man, and very few people who were not like. Ironically, the owner was the only cis het straight guy, although that's because
Hmm.
I think that's because he's an egg. But that's a that's an aside. Um,
Egg alert.
yeah.
That's also a button we should have is the egg alert.
Egg alert, yeah. I mean, you surround yourself with trans people. Everybody always thinks you're gay, but you only like women, and you really
Mm-hmm.
enjoy queer spaces. Anyway, I'm.
Hmm.
um.
Why do you feel at home here?
Yeah. But the thing was, like, it was all queer people. He wasn't paying enough. I think he was paying like in line with other businesses in the area at the time. This is before COVID, so all of those kinds of wages have gone up since then in the area. So he's probably paying at least a little bit more than that now. But the point is, like, he had a really good stock of workers that because this was a queer icon in the community. All these queer people came, worked extra hard for not very much money because it was a super supportive environment. And but the problem with that is he can ask for so much because he's supportive, right? Like that should be
Mm-hmm.
the bare minimum. That should be like you should be able to go to a job and be supported for your gender identity and sexuality, but that's not the case. So he
Right.
was able to get all of these people and not pay them as much as like and get so much more out of them for the money he was paying because he's basically like and he didn't know doesn't know he's doing this, but what the situation is either you keep working for me for this low wage or you go to somewhere where you can get more money but they're going to treat you like shit and they're not going to respect your pronouns and all that shit, and that
Right.
simple fact like twists the work environment so much, and he's like such a genuinely
Mm-hmm.
good guy. He thinks so much about like genuinely like his whole thing is he wants to have the ice cream be free, like literally that's his dream is to like somehow
Mm-hmm.
get around capitalism so he can just give out free ice cream and not make money off of it.
Right.
And he's and
Yeah.
but he's so like the circumstances of a small business owner is such that like you know he yeah it makes bad
He
decisions.
Right. He's trying to have a non-capitalistic business within capitalism, which just isn't possible. Like, and
Yeah.
it even reminds me of critiques that I've seen talking about how, under like a sexist or patriarchal system, even a completely like non-abusive man will still benefit from the fact that the standards are lower
Yeah.
because a lot of women and others have dated, abusive men. And of course, this isn't strictly like gender binary, but anytime you have like this perception that you're lucky to even find someone who isn't abusing any systemic power that they have over you, then it creates this coercive dynamic, even if you want nothing to do with it. Like, like there's nothing you can do to like scrub it off yourself as long as you're still paying people a wage and have the ability to make that stop happening. Like
Hmm.
people, especially like vulnerable queer people, are going to feel so indebted and so lucky to be there, or they're just going to recognize that don't have any better option. That means they're going to put up with a lot more shit. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's true. And like it was especially a thing there with queerness, but it's the same thing. You like you said with just being a woman, let
Mm-hmm.
alone like all of these other kinds of things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. The bar is so low, and that doesn't mean that there aren't genuinely like people trying their best, but systemically, it's not possible to do better than being like using discretion over somebody's livelihood that you should have never had in the first place. Um, yeah. Um, and here's I and Molna, I know you asked about have I written anything about autistic people being susceptible to cults. I mostly talk about it in Unmasking Autism in the book. That's where I profile it in the most depth. There's a few links out in this piece into some of the some research and some writing from autistic cult survivors about part of why that is. But and funnily enough, Maddie and I were talking about this yesterday on the test stream. Why are autistic people so susceptible to cults? And it seems to come down to a lot of things: the social vulnerability, the fact that we're underemployed at higher rates, the need for connection, and also the fact that a lot of us, because we struggle to understand what people want out of us because people are so indirect, cults and abusive workplaces and academia, all of these things, they have a hierarchy, they have a structure and a set of rules that they demand out of you for how what you have to do and what you have to give up in order to be a virtuous good person who gets to belong. And a lot of times that feels more appealing than being out in the social world where you don't understand. People do have rules that they want you to follow, but they won't even tell you what they are. At least a cult will like tell you what you're supposed to do to be a good person and give you a structure for it sometimes. So that's part of why that happens, I think. Yeah, and I write about all of this stuff as someone who went into academia thinking this is going to be the place for me. I can wear whatever I want. I can be this eccentric professor, and because of the strength of my ideas, I can be whoever I want to be, and I can pursue whatever I want to pursue. And that's not the reality. Um, it's a very kind of traditional workplace culture. There's a lot of kind of traditional values and a lot of traditional workplace values in academia where you're expected to be, presentable and very gender conforming, and you can really only study things that other people see the appeal in or and are going to fund, which is generally not going to be something that's too out there, too challenging of like the prevailing theories or literature at the time. And so, like any workplace, basically, it's not unique to psychology, but like any workplace, especially one with any kind of like hierarchy, the same the same bullshit's there.
Yeah.
Um, and that's kind of the next piece in the career discernment piece. One thing that was really interesting to me that I when I was asking other autistic and ADHD folks what careers have worked for you? What have you kind of found? A lot of people pointed out that they actually left corporate jobs, office jobs, academia, jobs that society says are more respectable and that society usually pays better for, because they found other lines of work to be more sustainable for them. Um, and some of this was kind of surprising to me because I would just for me I would think doing a full time like customer service kind of role would just be way too draining for me from a masking perspective. But actually, a lot of people shared that they liked bartending, baristaing, working on the sales floor, jobs where you can, especially now, if one job sucks, you can find another one in most American cities and suburbs even, and it's like kind of fast paced in a way that you're not sitting at like a stultifying desk all day and you're interacting with people in kind of a scripted way.
And
So that was something that I.
like we talked about, sometimes like being brusque or uh not chipper is like expected and part of the like kind of part of the job. Uh and also people talked about like there's more ways to hide it. And so yeah.
Yeah, yeah. If you work in like a corporate environment or academia, like you're supposed to go to a lot of these meetings where everybody's talking about the mission or the initiatives that they're forming, and you kind of have to do this performance of really believing that you're doing meaningful work, even if you've seen these initiatives never go anywhere, like over and over again. Um, Whereas in some service industry jobs, it's a little bit more normalized for people to kind of like everybody's smoking out back and rolling their eyes at how BS everything is. There's a little bit more of a pressure valve, at least with some of your coworkers, and sometimes in the physical environment too. If it's the kind of again coffee shop or bar where you can be a little aloof. Um, and yeah, this was also again very surprising to me. One person that I spoke to for this piece who's autistic and ADHD said that they've worked in academia, they've worked in kind of medical kind of tech field, but they liked bartending and sex work the best because you are just meeting a lot of people, you're having kind of like quick breezy interactions with them, and you can, depending on the bar and depending on the kind of sex work that you do, you can kind of blow off a shitty client, and it's kind of considered, that's part of just how it works. If you're at a really busy bar, you can ignore or give less priority to the shitty customers. And if you have a decent stable of sex work clients, you can kind of ignore the people who are not worth your time. So they actually had more power in those kinds of jobs than in a more prestigious line of work um, that paid better. So that was very interesting. A lot of people said corporate gigs are way more restrictive
Yeah.
in terms of just having really harsh norms, which we've kind of talked about. Dress code, everything else.
Yeah. Even just I don't remember if it was here or later, just like being able to wear comfortable clothes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, that's huge. Like, and that's changed a little bit with work from home, but yeah, like really restrictive professional attire versus someplace where like dressing in like kind of a like alternative, comfortable way is more allowed is also good. Ali Avocado said, "I feel like I want to have hope that I can genuinely do some good work. I don't want to lose that hope, but I don't know if I'm being naive." Um, I mean, it's hard because it's that it's the passion tax, right? That if you are getting into work because you really believe in the cause, or you really believe in the clients that you're serving, or whatever it is, your students, that does make you easier to exploit. That's really at the heart of how we underpay and overwork the shit out of teachers in this country,
Yeah.
for example. Um, but
But
that
it,
does.
at,
Oh,
at the same time, like you can, like there's some amount of a job can be easier if you believe in it, but it's
mm-hmm.
definitely something that you have to. Yeah, it's tough, and
It's a tightrope.
yeah, yeah,
David Graeber, who I talk about up here, in Bullshit Jobs, this book by David Graeber, which I love. He talks about how a lot of people who work in office jobs, we have completely meaningless jobs. Like we have an email job where nothing means anything, nothing really matters, and we kind of know that on some level. And he kind of says that part of why society keeps getting away with paying teachers and social workers and other people doing meaningful work so poorly is because on some level a lot of us are jealous that there are people out there who get to do something that they actually believe in and that actually matters. And so then we kind of twist it into you're lucky to even be working here. And so we're not going to pay you well because you're not in it for the money.
Yeah.
You're here for the kids or you're here for the art. I definitely see that in nonprofits and the arts a lot.
Yeah. I think about how
A lot,
game
a lot.
design is like one of the worst industries. Like the constant crunch and all that shit is like horrible in game design because people care. They want to make games.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. And just like having been in the arts and adjacent to like acting and things like that for years here in the city, it's the same thing where it's like, oh, you know, you might only be making $10,000 a year, but you're making a living as an actor. Like almost no one gets to do something like that, and so you can't complain about what's being demanded of you ever,
Yeah.
or complain about the employer being racist or whatever else. Like,
Yeah.
but it is true that it's just easier to get up out of bed in the morning and go to work if you actually believe in what you're doing and you like the people and you feel like it matters. So I'm not by any means saying like don't do that. Um,
I
I
think
think
is it in this part or later where you're talking about like expectations and having more realistic expectations can be helpful in like uh, results or
yeah, it's kind of like two pronged. Like there's like a temper your expectations piece about like when you're choosing a field or starting up at a new job, like kind of temper your own expectations. Like this place is not going to be my family or my salvation or whatever. And then the other piece of tempering expectations is from the setting expectations in your employer, keep the
yes,
bar low.
right. And then so if you like yeah, and what you're saying is kind of like I think is like if you have those like if when you tempered your expectations you can kind of like get what's um like you'll be able to like understand when you have a wider or more accurate idea of what's going to happen you can like make better decisions. And so it's like not like knowing that the like passion tax is a thing that exists, um or that or at the other end of the spectrum that like if you're doing an office thing like that doing something passionless is going to be a thing that could take spoons away from you. Like knowing whatever it is, knowing kind of where that is going to be helpful even if you do even if you do it and do it regardless, you know.
Yeah. I think when you have like and I think sometimes it's just like a stage of like coping. Like I talked about with going into academia, all bright eyed and thinking it was going to be this great thing, and then getting disillusioned, and then coming out the other side of that with a lot of strategies for. I know in what meetings I need to pretend I'm excited about an initiative because that will get me considered a team player, even though I know just from kind of taking the lay of the land and working at this organization for years that this initiative's never going to happen. The person that we need to approve it up the chain, he's just going to like never return our email, or like he's never going to be able to move it forward because he's doing too much. And so I can say yes to this initiative because I'm going to look like I'm taking on more work, even though it's never going to actually result in more work.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
versus joining this committee that is like internal to our department where I know I'm going to have like 3-hour meetings every week with my boss and my coworkers, and we're going to work on this thing, and I'm going to have to actually do it. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
Like, and some of that is, again, just discernment and learning patterns over time. Um, like there's burnout and there's the disillusionment of like, I don't feel anything about this job anymore and I can't do it. And then there's the like canny, jaded, my students matter to me, my clients matter to me. I'm going to put everything I can into that work, and everything else I'm going to half ass, and I'm going to strategically half ass it
Yeah.
so I can focus on that stuff.
Absolutely.
Plan an escape route. This is hard, and I understand that this would be really frustrating for a lot of people to hear because not all of this advice is going to apply to everyone. But the more desperate we are, the easier we are to exploit. And so the more you have some other route, you know where you're going to apply for your next job, you have interviews lined up, you have a savings, you have a relative you can stay with and help them out with childcare, or elder care, and live with them. Any kind of alternate route to working your current job and that being your only source of stability, is going to give you more power, because then you have that hit to bricks energy. But again, I know that that's like, I just don't want this advice to come across as like, oh, just cut down on lattes and have a savings account, because then you
Yeah.
can negotiate from a position of power. But I will take this moment to talk about the overemployed subreddit, which I just
Oh, yeah.
discovered this week.
This is so good.
This shit is incredible. So these people, many of you have heard of the anti-work subreddit, which has gone through different phases in leadership and it's had some issues. But especially last year, anti-work on subreddit was this place where people would go to talk about how they were quiet quitting their jobs, they were walking out of shitty jobs, they were just not really doing any work that they didn't absolutely have to anymore because they were disillusioned, and the scales had fallen from their eyes and they knew that they didn't have to give everything to their jobs anymore. Overemployed is kind of like anti-work's like weird cousin, weird Sigma grindset cousin.
Yeah, it's the same philosophy with the opposite mindset.
Yes. Yes, exactly. So where anti-work says, work won't love you back, work is inherently exploitative under capitalism, so I'm going to do as little as possible. Overemployed says jobs are fake, work won't love me back, and so I'm going to work 2 or 3 hours per day on four different remote jobs and collect four salaries.
Oh my god. Or
And
or like the picture that I know you saw, and I think it got shared around on Twitter, that led you to this, was 11 laptops and 11 jobs.
yes, I'm trying to find the picture. This guy had this, and that's how I found this subreddit. This guy had like, oh, here it is.
Yeah.
After getting my first remote job and realizing they only actually make you work 1 or 2 hours a day, I decided to just keep getting as many jobs as I can. I currently have 11 and I'm making 1.3 million per year.
Oh my god, I missed that number. Jesus. Okay, so I was just googling just to get to the subreddit so I could. There's a overemployed.com.
Oh,
Oh, what the
is it like a is it like a guide for how to do this?
yes. Okay, hold on. We're gonna let me switch really quick.
Yeah. Should I stop my share or
I think it's fine. The Devin's
okay?
video is gonna be messed up for a minute. Um, this is very strange. I love that, like, the AI art that they've got going on
Yeah.
here. What?
Oh my god.
I don't know what's happening here. Uh, let's look at some of these articles. Yeah, this is just like some micro blog that somebody, you know.
Yeah. They have so many tips on this fucking subreddit where it's like, how do I attend two meetings at the same time
God.
without them finding out? Or like, I have one hybrid job where I have to be in the office 2 days a week and the other job is fully remote. How can I log on to my physical workplace's Wi-Fi with the other laptop that my other job gave me so I can stay active?
Oh my god.
And a lot of these people are big fans of like the USB mouse jigglers, which you
Mm.
like plug into your computer, and so it just basically signals to your laptop that your mouse is moving every few seconds, so that you always look active. on Microsoft Teams or Slack, so that you look like you're available even if you don't get back right away.
Molna, you said, what's it like to afford 11 laptops? That's the secret, is most of these jobs probably sent them laptops.
Yes, that's
Lap-
part of the scam.
Laptops that you never give back. Just
Yes. Yeah, find some way to jailbreak it so that they can't log you out of the company, login system when when they catch you and you get fired. They also talk here on this subreddit about how to avoid background checks when you get hired at your, J3, J4. That's how they refer to jobs. Like, this is my J1, this is my J2, this is my third job,
yeah.
my J3.
It's like in PUBG when they Player Unknown's Battlegrounds, where they have all the loot, and so you can't take time to say, oh, I have a level 3 backpack and a UMP with this much ammo. You have to like break it down into like B3, G7.
There's no time.
Yeah.
There's no time. I'm working my fourth job. I can only say J4.
And Horse Girl says VPNs all the way. Absolutely.
Yes, yeah.
It's going to be an important part of that.
Right. Especially, if you're anything like me, you're using your company laptop to do things that your company would not want you to be doing in general, not just other jobs, but, well, and other jobs
Yeah.
too. um, so, yeah, you get a VPN and you scrub what you can off of that. How do people not get overwhelmed with that many jobs? Well, some of them do. Like, some of the tips on here are like take a vacation from both jobs every quarter so you don't get burnt out because you're working 10-hour days because you have 10 jobs.
Also, I, I
But
I feel like when it gets like I don't know if it's like unless you find the exact right job, I feel like this it can't be sustainable. Like there's but maybe you make enough money that you can just quit all of your jobs and coast for a little while. But like I think the really interesting part of this is more like the things we're talking about, like how can you use this is extreme and probably not advisable, but like this specific thing, but like
mhm.
using the laptop jigglers, using VPNs to skirt things, and like all of those different tips are useful to bring into your single job of like here are all these ways that speed runners effectively like these are
Right.
like glitches that they found to skip to the end credits of jobs, and it's like that's
Exactly.
insane. That takes 10,000 billion hours to like of doing it over and over again. You don't need to do that, but maybe you learn some meta of the game. Maybe you learn
That
about
is
mouse shoot.
job.
Right. Yeah.
Yes. That's exactly it. Like, you can use overemployed tactics to do less work at your J1 and your J only if you only have a
Only.
J only. Like,
Uh,
and you can bring overemployed energy, especially now with the job market being how it is. So, like, I don't know. Can people still see my screen or no
yeah, I put it
right
back.
now?
It's on your
Okay.
screen again.
Okay. So this person here is talking about how having two jobs gives you confidence. Their boss told them. So basically, they were in a meeting that went over time. And so then after it went over the scheduled time, they just left the meeting. And the boss was like, "Why did you do that?" And the OP just says like, "If I had just had one job, I would say I'm so sorry. I'd be afraid of offending my boss, and I would stay in these meetings that went long." And instead, they just said, because I protect my team's time and my own time, and we had gone over, I had to leave. Like,
God, fucking
hit me up on Slack if you need
liege,
anything else.
fucking liege. um,
My
and
liege,
yeah, and
King
you
Strats.
not even having more than one job, but applying. Like, I mean, that's like I feel like that is the old like even an old piece of advice that is like new in terms of you used to be able to get a job and have loyalty, but it's like that doesn't make sense anymore. Like always be submitting resumes out, and always be look
Hmm.
on the lookout for other jobs, um because they're not
Always
gonna.
be quitting.
Yeah. Always be quitting.
ABQ. Always be quitting. Have a quitter's mentality. Um, no, but like really, like this stuff, it really does. Like some of these strats, like really do help you set boundaries because for a while after I took my full time job at Loyola, I was teaching at like two or three different places, and that urgency, like again, I was doing it the completely wrong way. Like I was, I was cutting corners in order to keep working more, which is twisted. But that's, again, very
Yeah.
sigma of me.
Sigma grind
But
set. Yep.
that's sigma grind set. And so that meant that I would just be like, oh, I have to get to another meeting. I have to leave this meeting on time. And it was true, but the urgency came from the fact that I had another meeting at my other job. Or I would say, like, I have a phone call with a student, and I did, but it was a student at my J3, not at the main job that I had a meeting at. But, because I just had that, like, frenzied, I'm busy, I have this going on energy, people would really respect my boundaries. And you can do that without actually having three jobs.
Yep.
You can say like, okay, I had, this meeting was scheduled for this time. I need to go on to work on this task. If you need to reach me, you can email me. Please email me notes, or let me know if, if there's anything else you need me to do or whatever. And then you just fucking dip. Um,
And also you talk about to get to sort of a different topic. You get to like um just kind of thinking about your life in general, like outside of work. Um,
mm-hmm,
like you talk about what is it? Like somebody that has like uh another ADHD friend has lived with a married couple for many years. He describes their arrangement as kind of a platonic polycule. They make meals together, split
mm-hmm,
expenses, go on camping, biking trips, and are deeply committed to staying together. And that's like a thing that makes it viable for presumably for them to be underemployed. Um,
mm-hmm.
so there's lots of different things that you can think about, like, or there may be things that you can think about that where you can set your life up that you could quit a job and be able to have some breathing room, whether it's like you were saying, like retirement funds, or whether it's maybe your living situation is non-standard, or of a non-standard living situation that you could transfer to in an emergency.
Mm-hmm. Yes, the more you've at least thought through these options and you've realized that for yourself, whatever the prevailing like social narrative is of what your life has to be, that isn't true, the more freedom you'll have to not be exploited. So, and again, I don't want to sound like one of those if you eat fewer avocado toasts, you can afford a house type MFs. Um, but it is true that the conventional American workplace makes you spend a lot of the money that they pay you,
Right.
right? Like because of your commute and wearing professional attire and just kind of keeping up with people in terms of, what neighborhoods they live in, how they, just like clothe themselves, what kinds of cars they drive. Like most people who if they do start making more income, they're not actually bringing home, more money into their savings because they are being expected to spend more because of that those kind of lifestyle superficial things and just the practicalities of like you don't have time anymore to make your own lunch. You have to like buy it out and you have to have somebody else clean your house because you're working 80-hour weeks and you can't clean. You don't have time and energy to do that. So
And that's
anything
also
you
a part of the discernment part up front, and the hit the bricks part at the back is that take those things into account. If you're getting a new job, like making sure that you're thinking about, if you have the ability to be this discerning, taking into account fuel costs, or wardrobe stuff and stuff like that.
Yeah, yeah, because a lot of times a job that might sound more impressive on paper, or it might be a job that your parents would love that you have, or it makes more money in just like literal terms. If you are commuting 2 hours per day and that's eating up so much of your life that you're going to have to pay more for convenience foods. Your health and mental health are going to probably be worse. You're not going to have as much time for hobbies. Like it's going to be more expensive in a lot of different ways, as well as fuel economy and all of these other things. And so it really might not be worth it. And just having the freedom to kind of question that stuff. Again, a lot of people aren't going to have that option to be that selective, but think about what does the future look like for me, especially if you have disabilities. What do you plan on being working a 40-hour or more work week for the whole rest of your life and never being able to retire? Is it possible to think about the future in a way that is more communal? or if not communal, at least having other ways to pool resources with other people, so that you aren't as beholden to just a single income source your whole life.
Yeah.
And those are big questions, and it takes a lot of time and trust and good fortune to even have those kinds of relationships where you can build those escape routes. But I think, the more we think about it and start having those conversations with the people we care about, the more power we all have to refuse exploitation when it comes up.
Yeah, I mean, and that, I mean, that's another thing. Can you do that kind of? Can you be there for the people in your life that need it? Um, you know, can you make your friends and loved ones aware that they have a safe place at your place if they need it? You know, if you have that ability.
Yeah, so just speaking for myself, like I am a financial independence, retire early person, which is not going to be relevant for a lot of people's lives, and it's a cringy world where like people are like the leader of that movement, Mr. Money Mustache, is like, you should work out, you should lift weights in the snow because it makes you tougher, like he's like a believer in stoicism. So it's nonsense. But this idea that like I know that if I want to have meaningful relationships and a meaningful life, I need to just like have a really low cost of living, save as much as I can, which is something that I'm able to do, both of those things. Like I can live pretty cheaply and save a lot so that one day, just maintaining relationships and taking care of the people that I care about is what I want to do with my time, rather than work. And I'm sure I'll still do some writing and things that I find fulfilling, but like I'm I'm planning for like if my department ever gets phased out, that's it, like,
Yeah.
or if I just reach the end of my capacity because I just know what autistic burnout is like for me,
Yeah.
that I only have so many good years in me for getting work done, and so I've always been thinking about what am I going to do when I reach the end of that capacity, because I already know I get a lot. My capacity to be exploited is a lot less now than it was a few years ago, and it's only going to go down.
And that sucks. I think we should acknowledge, like, that sucks for you that you have to think about that, and that sucks for all of us that we. It's insane that we as a society have not built in ways for us to get old. Like, we're expected to
Mm-hmm.
die. It's horrible,
Yeah,
and it
yeah.
sucks that you are forced to think about that shit. But you know, yeah.
Yeah, but I think it's good to just like emotionally prepare and grapple with it. And so, for me, because I both have a kind of job where it is possible for me to save, and I have just kind of like health and lifestyle stuff where such that it makes it possible for me to live pretty cheap. Like, you know, I've been able to kind of come up with a plan for that stuff. And other people, their plans will look very different. But yeah, I think it's good to kind of contemplate.
Yeah.
Uh,
Lori asks, "Is book writing a sustainable form of income?" I always think it will be, but I sense that it's not.
no, it's not. Well, okay, let's go to publishing paid me. Let me pull this up.
Oh,
Okay.
right. This is like a whole website that. Oh, it's like a dot. Right. I remember. Yes.
Yes. Okay. So this started in 2020. So these are book advance amounts that authors have self-reported that they made in the interest of transparency, specifically to target racial disparities in publishing. So if you're an author and you work with a major publisher, one of the big five or big four now because of a merger publishers, um,
Did that
the way
happen?
that you
I thought it.
it's Oh, they're in an antitrust like lawsuit right now, like whether or not they'll be able to merge or not.
Oh man, God! I thought that got actually shut down, but
Yeah. Well, it's been going on since like because my first book was with Simon and Schuster, and right after that, after I got that book deal, Simon and Schuster got bought by Penguin Random House, which happens to be my second publisher
oh
for
god,
unrelated reasons.
hell world. But anyway, right.
Anyway, when you sell a book to a major publisher, you get something called an advance. And an advance is the only money you can really count on for sure ever getting, because it's called an advance because it's an advance on sales. So basically, they're giving you a certain amount of money. It's similar to a loan, but you never have to pay it back. It's basically they're investing in you a certain amount based on how much they think the book is going to sell. And if the book sells enough to recoup that advance, then you start getting royalties. This is called a book earning out. If the profits on the book exceeds how much they paid you for the book deal, you've earned out, and then you start accruing royalties, and royalties will be 10% per sale, 12% per sale. Mine are 12.5. But I don't earn royalties yet because I have not earned out on either of my books. And my books have sold well. The other thing to keep in mind is that in 2020, 95 or 98% of books released that year sold fewer than 5,000 copies.
Wow.
So most books don't sell many copies. Most books don't earn out. And so you can really only bank on your advance being for sure, the income you're going to get. And it's dispersed. You don't get it all at once. You get 25% usually when you sign the contract, 25% of that advance when you turn in the manuscript and it's accepted by the editor, 25% when the book comes out, and then the final 25% a year later, which is typically when paperback versions come out. So you can see here, just even on this one page, how buck wild the range of advances is. So there's some people who make zero or
God, yeah.
$1,000, and then you have people who made 2.5 million.
That's wild. This is such a cool tool, and it's so great that this is the kind of stuff that we need to be doing to like, you know, ensure that
Yeah,
our fellow workers are getting paid the way that they should. And if you can find resources like this when you are doing that career discernment, it's really really important.
yeah, and to just like kind of put it in perspective, this kind of went live because really famous, award-winning Black authors like M.K. Jemisin and Roxane Gay, their advances, sometimes even on their like second, third, fourth books, were like, $25,000, $30,000, and that's after they've already had a book that's won a Hugo and Nebula
Yeah,
science fiction award.
yeah,
Meanwhile, there are white authors who their first book flops and their next book they still get paid more,
right.
even though their first book didn't sell well.
And that's all.
So
Like all media is the disparity, and then also they're finding ways to give people less money. Like I'm reminded so much of how the HBO Max animation stuff where they just canceled a bunch of fucking or like not only canceled but just deleted. There's so many animated things that are just deleted off of HBO Max because they didn't want to pay the penny on the dollar royalties that these voice actors and animators were getting. And it's just like, yeah, it's cheaper to just not have these animated shows that have made a difference in the lives of so many people. They just don't exist. You can't consume them in any legal way, because they
yes,
don't want to pay these fucking pennies to like world class voice actors.
right, and yeah, to pay the royalties to people for the labor that they've done, that they are contractually, insured, but not actually insured if the thing doesn't get distributed. And so that is why in this house we stan piracy,
Yeah.
libgen.rs, fmovies.to, solar movies, putlockers,
Should we just
123 movies.
should we just do like a piracy how to?
Yeah, we should do a piracy stream. Yeah, that would
Would we
be.
get taken off Twitch? Does anybody know?
Ooh, that's a good question. Are we allowed to talk about illegal? Well, we probably, yeah, they probably have some kind of policy for talking about illegal things.
Yeah. We'll see. Yeah. Well, anyway.
Maybe we'll frame it in the right way. Like, can you believe there are internet websites where people just give away books for free, such as libgen.rs? It's terrible
It's
that you can find almost any book on there.
it's like there's a really this is total aside, but there's a really great whitest kids you know sketch that's like, it's illegal to say I want to murder the president on television. You can't say it. You can tell people that it is illegal to say I want to kill the president with a machine gun on this date. You can tell people that, but you can't say it. Like,
Right. You can tell people that it's illegal to say that. So, thankfully my publisher has never said anything to me about it. Like my agent, I think every day my agent looks at my Instagram stories and it's like like what's
Weird
wrong with
Al.
this?
Weird Al recently was on Twitter and was like, somebody asked him, "How do I watch your movie in Australia?" And um, he was like, "Well, unfortunately, right now VPN, very no, very I
Very probably no. There's very probably no
um
way.
uh Ponuli was says I was sued for torrenting when I was like 15. Like actively they took you to court? That's
Oh my
nuts.
god. The one time I ever had to pay money to the Recording Industry Association of America, it was for using Loyola's campus Wi-Fi to download and illegally an MP3 of S&M by Rihanna.
God.
And when I downloaded it and I put it on my fucking like iPod Touch, because that's what year it was, I knew I was doomed because the second I started playing the track, I saw a picture of like a man in a suit, just like a little like chubby little man in a khaki suit, like some lawyer had
What?
like attached his picture as like the album cover art instead of it was still S&M by Rihanna. The song was actually S&M by Rihanna, but it was just this like lawyer who was just like you caught the bait, bitch. And
um
so then I had to pay $50, $50 fine.
uh uh they caught they were caught torrenting Deadpool, which I think that's very Deadpool behavior, I will say. Getting caught.
Deadpool with torrent.
Oh my god.
Deadpool with torrent, so that's just not fair.
VPNs cost money, and VPNs are good to have. If you don't have a VPN, I highly recommend PeerBlock, which just it's a big list of IP addresses that it just blocks. So like Hewlett Packard, it just blocks that because it's like they're not going to be seeding you a torrent. Um, so
Yeah.
that's a good thing to know.
Yeah.
Anyway,
So as you can see here, like to go back to that original question of like, can you make money as an author? Like, I mean, I have. Like, I could if I kept being a book a year bitch, which I shouldn't do because it's not sustainable. I'm gonna run out of things to say, but I could probably make a living off of that. But that's because I had an article that went viral, and so I was able to get a good book deal because of that. Um, your book advance size is really related to how many social media followers you have. Do you already have an audience? Do you already have something that's gone pretty successfully? And if not, you're going to be more in the low thousands range that you can see here. And sometimes academia not only doesn't pay, sometimes they make you pay to publish.
God,
It's a fucking scam.
yeah, capitalism is a
Yeah,
scam.
it's awful. So, yeah, if anybody's curious to look into this more, and they collect like it's broken down by like gender, sexual orientation, whether they had an agent, all of this other data. It's really interesting. So if you just Google "publishing paid me" spreadsheet, or I can link to it later, but you know,
Oh, we can actually put that.
it.
We can actually put that in the chat.
Oh, okay,
I'll find it
me.
and put it in there.
Okay, okay. I can also just like put it in the Discord. Um, but yeah, it's really fascinating stuff. And so, is it possible to have a career as a writer? Yes. You'll need an agent. And that I'm going to publish an article about this because I have an article that I wrote like 2 years ago about how all of this stuff works. And I've just kind of been sitting on it for a while because it was for a publication with Medium and then they ended the publication. So, but we can definitely talk about publishing industry stuff because it's an industry I find super fascinating and I think a lot of people have questions. So now that we've talked about the higher order shit that can be kind of bleak, life under capitalism, and the coercive nature of work and unfulfilling nature of it, I think we can tear into some of the fun stuff which is how do you fuck over your employer as much as possible and
Yes.
keep a job while doing the minimum. Um,
Which we talked some about. I think it might be helpful to reiterate some of the things we've already talked about. Like, so we've talked about like mice jigglers to show that if you have an activity thing, you know, I think you said somebody put like a GIF on a tablet on top of their mouse and it just showed as movement. There's proper software you can use to. Uh,
Macros,
yep. What do you call it?
ghost meetings.
Ghost meetings. Yeah, and
Yes,
defensive scheduling.
defensive scheduling. Yes.
Yeah.
So if you're in a workplace where there's an Outlook calendar or anything like that, schedule private meetings that are just with yourself. Or if that's not possible, like if you can find a workplace buddy, I know people who do this with a friend at work too, where you schedule meetings with each other, but you set it to private so people can't tell, you know. So when they're trying to schedule, you know, an all hands, you know, stand up meeting, whatever, they just see that you're blacked out on the calendar that day.
Yeah.
Or if you need to put details into it, put fake details into it. Just, you know, be strategic. But basically, especially if your job, you have to like sit down and focus to get something done. Like if you're writing code or you're like writing copy, you know, whatever it is, and they don't give you time to do your actual fucking job because there's so many meetings. Schedule meetings with yourself to get that shit done, and schedule meetings after your work meetings to just like chill out and
Yeah.
take a walk, and take a shit, and do the laundry and stuff like
and
that.
and like we talked about, I think at an even more base level, like remember that it is okay to cheat. That like capitalism is bad. It is a bad system. It is every workplace, even the best workplaces, are built on foundations of where you are powerless. Like, um, it's just a fundamentally bad system, and you are being cheated even at the best workplaces. So do not be
Right.
afraid to, and you know, do not be afraid to, like you said, lie, cheat, and steal to get what you need. Um, and it is not your responsibility. Your responsibility is to yourself and not your coworkers. Your job's
Right.
responsibility is to your coworkers. You can't. So, just
Yeah.
summing up the things that we've talked about already in this stream.
Yeah. No, that's really good because a lot of people need that pep talk. Uh, Getting in trouble is a fake idea. Like, work is not moral. Like doing your job. It cannot ever be a moral enterprise to be doing something that you're forced to do in order to live. Like that's just from its outset, from the structure of how it operates. It's not a moral enterprise where there's some harm, or some moral offense to you, like doing a shittier job. Like they mislead you as an employee all the time, about what your job duties are going to be, about what your benefits and expectations should be, you know. So you should also, uh, if not outright lie to them, I mean, yes, lie, but also just find whatever ways you can to kind of obscure how much work you're actually doing, overhype your accomplishments, round up how much time things take, cultivate an image of yourself as really stressed out and busy. Like, if we're going to live in a culture where working hard and being stressed is seen as virtuous, at least put up a front of that and turn it to your advantage, because that'll make it easier for people to, um, leave you alone, and for you to find some peace of mind. So,
Yeah.
highly recommend that. So that brings us to the first tip here: oversell your efforts and accomplishments. This is like the principle for whether you're trying to find a job and doing interviews, writing your resume, or when you're doing your performance evaluations at work on a day to day basis, period. Like, you need to round up how long things are taking, how hard it was, give yourself credit for every single step that was involved in the process, from, you know, making a Google form to emailing it out to people to compiling the data to analyzing the data to getting the PowerPoint slides ready, like to, you know, like cleaning the kitchen, like whatever it is that you do, give yourself credit for every single little thing you do, especially if it's treated as invisible by your employer and they don't give you credit for how much time it takes.
Which is most things.
Most things.
Pretty much everything.
Yes. Yes. And that also means like putting things in really flattering language. So like if your boss hired someone new who's never worked in food service before, and even though you're not a manager officially, you had to teach this person how to do a bunch of shit and mentor them, like bring that up that you did employee training and that you did mentorship and that you put a lot of energy into that. um, the next time you're applying for a job, say that you did those things and you have experience doing that kind of leadership work, because you do. You're actually not lying. Like you're just getting credit where credit is due.
Absolutely.
And that's true with anything you've had to pivot, any new technology you've had to learn, any little annoying fire you've had to put out. Like, give yourself some fucking credit and trumpet it, herald it with trumpets and a choir of angels.
You deserve it.
You deserve it, and fuck them.
Yeah.
Panuli said, got a scholarship interview on the weekend, and I think overhyping the hardships I've gone through would be good there as well. Yes, though, yeah, I think especially for a scholarship. Yeah. I would say for some jobs, unfortunately, people have this bias where it's like, what's that quote from The Importance of Being Earnest? Like, to lose one parent is tragic, but to lose two suggests some like I can't remember what it is, but it's like suggests some kind of like lack of attention or something like that. That
Yeah. Ugh.
this like weird bias people have sometimes that if you have too many hardships, they think it's like your fault somehow because of like ableism and like the just world hypothesis where people want to think that we live in a just world and if bad things happen to you, it must be because you deserve it. That kind of thing. You know what
Yeah.
I'm saying?
Eric,
Um,
you are absolutely entitled to a 10% raise on your current mod
on your
wages.
yeah, I'll double it. I'll double it. You get two times zero. Um, thank you for your service, and you're gonna get promoted to editor too. I'm gonna give you editor privileges right now. Oh wait, it won't let me do it right now in the app, but I'm gonna make you a stream editor as well, for no dollars. Um, and a thing about this that I want to really hammer home because I know a lot of autistic people and ADHDers, you have this imposter syndrome, which is really just person who's been told everything's their fucking fault all the time syndrome,
Yeah.
rational response thing where a lot of people lack confidence and they are very literal and fair-minded and are trying to be objective about their faults and their strengths. Don't do that at the workplace. Do that in your real relationships that are egalitarian and where you want to be honest and show up for each other. You don't want to do that for work. You want to be your own best advocate at work, and that means you need to round up how hard you're working and how much you've accomplished.
And
And we know. Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, and like you say in the article, like especially neurotypical people are already doing that. Like you have to be doing that to compete. You know.
Yes, there's this concept in psychology called depressive realism. And basically, what it holds is that non depressed people, neurotypical people, are irrational. They think they are above average in everything. They think they're an above average driver, they're above average, conventional attractiveness, they're above average intelligence. Again, these are all very subjective things, but, people are in their own corner for the most part, especially neurotypical people, whereas people with depression gauge their skills accurately. Um, and that's why it's called depressive realism. That depressed people have an accurate gauge of how good of a driver they are, or how attractive other people find them, or how hard they've worked.
Yeah.
So act like a bloviating, overconfident, neurotypical person, even if you don't believe it.
Yeah.
Even if you don't believe it,
It'll help you believe it too if you act like that.
it yeah, it really does. Like I just had my performance review at work, and I just go through my calendar for the whole year and look at like things I did that I totally forgot that I did, and then I list it as if it was this impressive thing, and it totally wasn't in my mind, but it's something that I did. It's part of my job, and it makes my dean more impressed with me. So it's like, hey, shit.
Yep. And Lori says to lose one parent may be regarded as a misfortune. lose both looks like carelessness is the full quote. Thank you
That's
for
it.
that.
Thank you, Lori.
Yeah.
Yes, and yeah, it's this joke that like if you have enough bad things happen to you, people start doubting you,
Yeah.
and that's so true for disabled people. It's really interesting how ableism just really works on people's brains, where people really want to think that if you've had a lot of bad stuff happen to you, it must be because you're not trying hard enough.
Yeah.
So, but for scholarships, I think overhyping or just putting attention on hardships you faced, I think scholarship committees tend to like that because it's that narrative of overcoming adversity
Right.
that like really gets them hard. But at a job, I would be careful because some jobs will kind of penalize you,
Yeah.
or they feel your hardships are contagious. Yeah,
Yep.
exactly.
Wow.
Okay.
Even my therapist told me that my struggles with keeping friendships mean I'm a crappy person. That is awful and not true.
No, it's not. It's that like if somebody has a problem multiple times, it must be them idea, which that's just even like even if it's the case of like someone, let's say, keeps getting into bad romantic relationships because they are drawn to certain kind of unsafe qualities, that's still not their fault. Like even if it is a behavior pattern, it's
Right.
still not your fault. You know what I mean? Like
Yep.
there's reasons why someone develops those patterns.
Yep.
uh, yeah, I'm so sorry. That's an awful thing for a therapist to say. And that brings us to our next piece of advice. In addition to overhyping your accomplishments, when you start a new job, set expectations low. Don't overperform. Don't push yourself to learn everything as quickly as possible and complete it as quickly as possible. You are setting the baseline for what they should expect out of you. So you need to set a sustainable pace. Um,
Yeah.
and your coworkers will thank you for that too.
Yep.
This is something that one person said. I really wish I'd been aware that if I show my employer I can memorize everything they tell me, that'll be my baseline forever. It doesn't mean I can keep up that steep learning curve beyond a few weeks, but they still expect it.
Yep. Yeah.
This is a real thing that happens to a lot of autistic people and ADHDers. That when we're in like hyper focus, high energy, like survival mode early on, sometimes we can really do the most, and people value us for how useful we are to them. Um, and the second we, reduce that, we get penalized. So, you know, and we do that because we're so used to being rejected that we really want approval and we really want to do a good job. So just notice that in yourself and try and like temper it a little bit.
Yep. Horse Girl asks, as an aside, do you have any recommendations on how to talk about resigning from previous positions or gaps in work history during the interview process?
Ooh, Maddie, do you have any uh, tips, or like how do you talk about that kind of stuff? Like, or do you leave certain jobs out? I know that's one strategy a lot of people have, that they'll just like
I
leave out
definitely,
certain jobs.
yeah. I part of what I think the big thing that I've done is finessing, like when you've left,
Mm-hmm.
finessing when you start and when you left.
Yep.
Um, I've been lucky that I've had very large gaps in my work history, and I've been lucky to not, for the most part, not be questioned on it. Um, so I haven't needed to kind of come up with things, but um, yeah, just anything you can say. I think not being afraid to lie about it is maybe the first step. Like,
Yeah.
and they're not going to catch you. Like no one is going to like call a previous employer. Like, well, I shouldn't say that cuz that does happen, but like there like so much of that stuff, it doesn't happen. Like nobody's going to
Mm.
call your school to make sure you got a diploma, like make sure you got a diploma. Like,
Yeah.
and that stuff has legal consequences, and so there's a balancing act there, but like they just aren't going to check that stuff a lot of times.
Yeah. Especially if you're not listing a specific job as like a reference. So let's say that you had a job like 3 years ago that you worked at for like a few months or something, but it's really relevant to the job you're applying to right now. So you want to list it as work experience. If you're not listing that job as your reference, they're not going to contact them. So lie about how long you were there, literally, like straight up, just lie about how long you worked there. And if you're not giving them the contact info for your manager when you were there, if you're not using that person as your work reference, they're not going to check in most companies. Again, really like harsh, like corporate stuff and government jobs, sometimes they will be more thorough
Yeah, it definitely depends.
about certain things. Yeah, or like, a university job, they will ask for an official transcript that you graduated, but like a lot of workplaces don't care if you graduated and they won't check.
Entry level stuff, they're not going to check any of that shit.
Period. Yeah,
Never.
so just say you'd finished it. Yeah.
um,
So even if you only, yeah, just say you finished it. Like,
heck, caring for an ill family member is a good gap filler. I absolutely agree.
mm-hmm,
I That reminds me of my favorite excuse in the world for anything, which is it's a long story.
mm-hmm.
It's just like I don't that it doesn't quite. Usually, you can't do it in an interview. That might not be uh, like quite the ideal excuse, but like stuff like that where it's just like
And yeah, and it's good because it actually shows like professional discretion, like
yeah,
because unfortunately in a lot of job interviews, if you go into a whole long story about how you needed to leave a job because you were physically ill or had a mental health thing or had to deal with a family member who needed your support, it's that importance of being earnest quote again, where like people are get uncomfortable with like negative realities and
yeah,
they don't want to hear too much information about them and it bums them out, and so then they associate you with a negative emotion they feel from thinking about death or illness.
yeah,
So if you can be kind of like neutral to slightly upbeat and just oh, I was caring for an ill family member, and like, but I don't want to bore you with the details. Like something that's kind of just showing discretion, basically. That's actually considered a very professional way to handle those kinds of things.
yep,
And again, lie, and list friends of yours as references, like
yeah,
straight up. Like if you can have someone who sounds good on the phone, can do a good like fake manager kind of performance. They don't have to be like an award-winning actor at it, but if they can just kind of answer the phone and say, yes, this person worked for me, I can confirm that they worked during these dates, because that's legally usually all that's going to be asked,
and they usually won't
anyway.
call.
Yeah, and they usually won't even do that. Like most places really don't have the energy. Larger institutions are more likely to at least confirm that you worked where you said you worked, um, but that's only going to be your most recent couple of jobs that you list as references usually.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I've been asked 2 or 3 times, and I've never actually gotten a call. Um,
yeah.
Another also they can't call a business that's no longer business.
Mm-hmm. Or universities that no longer exist too.
Yeah,
So, um, those sometimes they have ways of handling transcripts, but yeah. So if it's a business that's out of business, you can always say that you worked there
yep,
as well. And that's some of those tips also apply for if you need a reference for like housing and stuff. Have a friend pretend to be your last landlord. Like, fuck it. Um, Another thing when it comes to setting expectations low on the job is just know that that is good for your fellow employees. If you're not saying yes to everything and doing the most, that helps kind of reduce this arms race of productivity that ensues at a lot of workplaces where the person who stays the longest after hours is seen as the best employee and everyone's held to that standard. Don't raise the standard,
yeah,
lower the standard, together as best you can.
yeah.
Here's another person saying, I basically play the game working in retail, so people leave me alone and I never let them know how capable I am.
Yep.
Yeah. And that's also another strategy, just generally, to be kind of like chipper, kind of lightly pleasant and oblivious. If you seem like slightly more clueless than you actually are, but in a very like happy, helpful way, that is a really good tone to have, because then you can just kind of say that you can kind of give people the impression that you didn't pick up on what they were implying in a way that they won't punish as harshly as they would if it was like, oh, you're autistic and you're failing to read between the lines. I'm going to punish you for that. Versus if you're just kind of like, oh, I'm just so upbeat and positive. I never would have thought that someone was,
Yeah.
saying something negative in between the lines. Like,
Yeah, and if especially if they're saying something shitty, just like make them explain it. Yeah,
right.
like
Yeah, or just don't react at all. Like especially if somebody's doing like some kind of passive aggressive like if a coworker's saying some passive aggressive stuff that implies you didn't stay late enough or you're not doing enough, just like act like you don't understand it and you're just like, "Oh yeah, I did go home." Blah blah blah. You're like, "Oh, I had a good weekend." Like,
yeah,
"Thanks for asking." That kind of energy.
yep,
Um Here we've kind of already talked about it. When it comes time for a performance evaluation, give yourself credit for every little thing you did.
yeah.
Um, and moving into a little bit more about the not overcommitting piece, uh, when you get asked a question or asked to take something on, just like think for a minute before you jump and say yes, because you'll have this urge to be a good little worker bee, but you don't have to always do that. Um,
Is this where you start? In this piece you talk about your worker sona and your job or your job sona. I like that a lot, and like that intentional like distancing your like this doesn't have to be you, and I mean that's not something you talk about really specifically in this piece, but like it's sort of like the framework where it's like you know this is this they have all of these double standards and are tailoring how they interact with you based on what's good for business, and you can do that too. You can
right.
create your little worker sona that like you were just saying, like is takes a minute, is oblivious to to barbs, and you know can be
Yeah, and just
wonderful.
lets things slide off their back because you just like don't give a fuck because you're just like in your own little happy little place.
Yeah,
And this is where like kind of masking is complicated, Masking is a tool. Taking steps to camouflage or compensate for your disability, that's a series of different tools and strategies. And so when you're in control over how you adopt those strategies and you use them in the service of fulfilling your own values and taking care of yourself, that is fine. All humans do some degree of masking in the sense of altering how they present themselves to others based on the social context and the expectations around them.
yeah,
So, masking, even though for autistic people and ADHDers, it can be this really soul sucking, false performance that takes a lot of energy, that's the case when we have to do it and we're expected to do it in the service of like conforming to neurotypical standards. Um, but if you are just saying, I'm going to use a little bit of my masking skills to be diplomatic at work in order to do less work, that's not like a failure of like disability justice or something. Like, you don't need to be
yeah,
ashamed of that. It's totally fine. Like, if you spent all these years learning how to pretend to be something you're not by force, you might as well put that skill to use to
yeah,
make your life easier. You know what I mean?
yeah.
Yes. Yes. So cultivate an image of yourself as busy, you know, helpful, but oh gosh, I already am doing this, this, and this. How am I going to, if you'd like me to take on this additional duty, who's going to help me with this obligation because I'm doing this, this, and this? Present yourself as like you're being helpful, but gosh, you just have so much going on and you're already doing so much for this organization and you care so much, but you don't actually.
Yeah.
One thing that came up from a lot of retail and service industry workers that I talked to: be really rigid in your schedule as much as you can be. Turn off your phone when you're not at work
Yeah.
so that they can't call you and say somebody no called, no showed. There's a bull in the china shop knocking everything over. We need you here. Like you're not there,
Can't
and
make a
don't give any information.
can't make a threat if you can't if there's no communication. Like,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I've even seen some people on anti-work be like, if your employer gets shitty about it, then say like, well, I don't have a phone. Are you going to start paying for my phone?
yeah, seriously.
Yeah, don't give your work your phone number if you can help it, or change it, or have your phone die. Um, and when you say no to something, again, present it in a helpful, aw shucks, I sure would love to do this, but it's just mathematically impossible for me to do any more work than I'm already doing. You know, how are we going to make this work kind of tone? And if you say no to something, don't give too much information because then they'll counter argue with it.
Yeah.
Ali Avocado says, my one coworker who is on the same level as me tries to check me on very small details, like forgetting to tick a single irrelevant box on a form. And I just completely ignore the aggressive controlling vibes he's giving me.
Yep.
Killer. Great job. Because, yeah, that person's being a bootlicker. They've internalized this idea that they're supposed to be a good worker and everybody's supposed to work as hard as they do.
Yep. Yeah. And
And you can't change their mind for them, but
yeah, Kika was saying, you get to really sometimes you get to dunk on someone in a really creative, unexpected way. you know, it's
mm-hmm.
yeah, it's a useful tool, and that's kind of what we were talking about. Like, building a. I think that's this whole thing is building a tool set, right? And
Mm-hmm.
and thinking about this stuff from a outside of the expectations that we're given in society and capitalism and all that stuff, and
Mm-hmm.
thinking through this stuff and building mental tool sets, because there's all different kinds of ways you can use this stuff, and
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
don't all work the same all the time, but
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's building tools and building a sense of when to use what tool and getting rid of any guilt that you might have over using it. Because I think we hold ourselves back because we're afraid we're going to get caught, we're afraid we're going to get in trouble, or that it makes us a bad person.
yeah, hurts our
And
coworkers.
but once you start using some of these things, sometimes you'll be astonished at how much you can get away with, or how much it just changes the script.
Yeah.
You know. I linked here to this article by Emma Barnes, and I have another piece coming up soon that also talks about it. She talks about how you should reframe your accessibility requests. Instead of saying, I have this disability and I can't do this, or because of my autism, this is hard for me, focus on framing it in terms of what you need from the environment and place the blame on the environment. Um, and she talks about it in more detail with examples in her article. And the great thing about this tip is it allows you to make accessibility requests without even naming that you have a disability sometimes,
Yeah.
which can be a good thing because a lot of employers are just discriminatory or unfair about it. So instead of saying, I have sensory processing disorder, I need, like, I can't work in this open plan office, that locates the problem in your employer's mind on you and on your disability. Instead, if you articulate it in a very specific, I need a quiet room to focus on writing these reports, they're due at the end of the week, and I want to make sure our clients get the best quality reports they possibly can get. You don't actually care about that. You just want to not be in sensory pain all the time. But if you frame it in that way, you're more likely to get it without having to disclose, unfortunately, stigmatized information.
Yeah.
Lori Loves Prince says, I learned to nod my head at new initiatives, like I was going to participate, and then just keep going on. Found out no one followed up. That's exactly what I do in
Yep.
academia.
Yep.
Like, oh, great idea. Oh. Um, Another thing you don't want to be too giving on, not just your time, but also yourself and your thoughts and your feelings.
yeah.
Um, I talk about this a little bit in this piece. I have a friend of mine who is a programmer, and they had a really like cushy on paper work from home job at this like queer friendly tech company, and they were part of this apprenticeship program that was to get more people of color and queer people in tech, and the apprenticeship program sucked for them because they were giving them just like real baby level programmer tasks, stuff that was too easy for them, and so it got them underestimated as as a professional. And so they were like, listen, you might be thinking you're trying to make this program more inclusive, but you're setting expectations so low that it's insulting and it's actually holding us back
Yeah.
as marginalized programmers. And so they wrote, and like they showed me the emails they were writing to try and communicate this because they have ADHD. They're used to people assuming the worst out of their tone, and they were like, here's how I've written it out. And I'm like, yeah, that's very diplomatic. That seems fine. And
Yeah.
they still ended up getting phased out of the company because they were too angry and writing too long of emails.
God.
So this should happen. So that means like be strategic about whether you're going to even give them information,
Yeah.
including critical feedback, because again, you shouldn't be so invested in making the workplace a better place that you wind up getting punished for being the bearer of bad news.
Yeah. You have to keep yourself safe first. Put your air mask on first. Like, same stuff we've been talking about this whole time. It's just, they're trying to fuck you at every turn. You have to be defensive.
Yeah, yeah, and it's not worth it a lot of the time. Like, a lot of times they won't implement your suggestions anyway, or they don't actually care that they're not doing something correctly. So, and this is just something that's come up again and again. Like when I was doing research for unmasking autism, a lot of people get reprimanded at work for just saying, this plan has not worked in the past. I don't think it's going to work this time. Here's why. Just like very neutral statements of like, we've tried something similar. It didn't work because of X, Y, and Z. And so I think it will again not work.
Right. Yeah.
And people will get punished for like not being a team player.
Yep.
So, so sometimes it's okay to just like let them continue to fail and just kind of be like, that's nice.
Yeah. I have to, before we move on, I have to show that, well, she was. Charlie was watching you, Devin, on the
Oh,
screen.
oh,
Here, wave a
child.
little bit.
Oh, can Charlie like understand there's people in the computer?
I don't think so. I think she just, well, when I was doing remote therapy regularly, and I think she did get it then, but I don't do remote stuff enough. But she does like to watch just the movement on the screen sometimes, especially if I move my
Aw,
mouse around. But anyway,
aw.
a little bit of cat time.
Cat time, loaf alert.
Loaf alert.
Loaf time. Oh, okay. So Maddie, what are some like, because I've been talking a lot this last stretch, like what are some like things that you've found ways to like cut corners at jobs or like strategies you've used at different workplaces that were like up to some bullshit like
Let's see. I'm so bad at this, honestly. um, my
yeah, you're a very helpful, considerate person.
Yeah, and I'm very privileged in that I've had a very easy time hitting the brakes. So
Yes.
I've
Well, that's crucial.
yeah, exactly. Like I've just fucking left jobs because they take too much from me. Um, but I think just recognizing that they're doing it is so important. Recognizing
Yeah.
you know how jobs are taking from you, and how, yeah, just that. I think that's the biggest thing that I've done.
Yeah.
um
The reframe is big because then it means like even if physically things aren't changing that much, like you're not beating yourself up for other people's shit as much, you know?
yeah, yep. And also, like, like I've been saying, like recognizing that it is not your responsibility. You don't it it is the business has a responsibility to your coworkers. It's not your, like, your responsibility to take care of your coworkers. You can't. It's
Right.
impossible.
Yes. I see Lori left a comment about I used to write emails the day before and schedule them to be sent early the next day while I was sleeping in. That
That's a
I
great
think
one.
brings that's perfect. That comes up to one of I think our next like set of tips, which is like streamline and systematize any part of your job you can so that you don't have to work as hard.
Yeah.
Um, Let me see. Yeah, here it is. Perfect. Script and systematize aspects of your job. Um, so there are so many inefficiencies in the workplace. And a lot of autistic people tend to be very systems thinking. They see how pieces and parts of an organization or a process fit together in a slightly different way. And ADHDers tend to be higher order, big picture thinkers who are really creative and have a lot of like life hacks for getting things done just in order to survive as ADHDers in this world. So if you can use that to mean that you're doing less work, but you look good, you're golden. Um,
And I think it's easy to do the opposite, right? It's easy to like, you see how all of these things can be streamlined and systematized, and so you like take on more work to make them
right.
better because you're like, well, you know, I if we could be doing all this stuff, and it's like that's and a lot of the times it's like you're just literally not going to be able to fix those things, and also you have to be doing that defensive thing of not taking
Mm-hmm.
on more work because you will just if you give them an inch, uh, they will keep that inch and take more and more and more and more.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's because like if you are kind of systems minded, you'll see flaws in the system and you'll be like, this isn't working. If we did this, things would be so much better. And you'll put all this effort into fixing it, and then some other like institutional roadblock will like come along, and it won't even matter,
Right.
and it won't work.
Right.
So instead, you can just say, okay, I know now. I've learned how to game the system instead of try and improve it.
Yeah.
Um, so
Yeah.
programming
It's if
examples. Oh,
Lori
go ahead.
says if I send out more email, I get more email.
Yes. Yes, because people use their inbox as their to-do list. And I'm guilty of that too. So people will reply to the email to keep things moving forward. But then that's like you're just giving everybody another thing to respond to
Yeah.
and move forward.
Using the
So,
yeah, using the like button to show I read an email. Took a look out of my off my phone. Said I don't check email more than a few times a day. Productivity
yeah,
purposes as well. Yeah.
it's solid. I used to be an inbox zero person, and it was such a waste of time. I would get all of these people telling me they were so impressed with how fast I emailed them back, and that just set the standard. And now I email it like in the morning while I'm still getting caffeinated, and maybe at the end of the day, and that's kind of it.
Yeah.
And anything that matters for the most part, like that's gonna be fine. And yeah, a lot of email is just like people trying to look like they're doing something. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so scheduling emails is great. Another thing I really like to do is to be like, oh, I'm really full up this week. Can we kick this meeting into next week? Or can we move this deadline? Just, Friday isn't going to work. Let's do Monday. Sometimes you can kick things a week ahead forever. Like,
Yeah.
that's definitely happened to me with some work initiatives. Um, Streamlining, if you do any programming, there's a lot of things that you can do to kind of just make to write code that will do the work for you. There's a book called How to Automate the Boring Stuff in Python, and I have a link there for the free PDF of that. But you don't have to be a programmer to do this. This tip here about pre-writing writing feedback is really like it's something that I learned at one of my teaching jobs as well. That if you're an educator, if you're a teacher of any kind, and you're grading papers or math assignments, even, your students are probably making certain kinds of errors or struggling with certain things over and over again. Like there's probably a pattern to what kinds of things people find hard. So you can do this in Microsoft Word. You can pre write feedback for the most common errors that students tend to have. And so then instead of having to write out a really long comment every single time in the Word document saying, oh, you didn't cite your sources, here's why it's important to cite your sources, here's a link to the APA, citation guidelines, you just hit like a quick key and it just produces that feedback for you.
Yep. And that doesn't even have to be like setting it up as a macro. Like I mean, you can just have a document that has a bunch of copy stuff you can copy paste if that's easier for you. And if you're doing emails, there's probably something you can write out that you don't have to type every time. Like if you're writing anything at all, like that's a really easy one to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so like for my classes, I have like a welcome email. I have after the first week, here's some tips for how to, improve your quiz taking strategies email that's pre-written. I have like a here's how you actively read,
Yeah.
email, and I schedule these things out because students need to hear that stuff every semester, and it helps them every semester. Um, and
I just want to
if I
call.
am,
Oh,
oh,
sorry.
go
I
ahead.
just wanted to call out that we are at 100 followers now. So,
Oh shit!
thank you,
Yeah,
everybody.
nice.
Thank you to everybody who's been following. We haven't been calling them out
Yeah,
actively, but
yeah,
thank you. Turn
and
on the bell or whatever so you get notifications. I don't know if you have to.
yes,
I think you have to set that, but
yeah,
yeah.
or you get like an email or something. Yeah, yeah, and I also like I know I need to be mindful of the time because I know you have stuff coming up, so we should probably end at like 2:30, right? Or 2:30 my time, 3:30 your
I
time,
think
right?
I think my time is more flexible than I thought it would be, but we can definitely keep it to whatever, you know.
Yeah, yeah. Like we'll get through like kind of riffing on these like sections and then probably call it, and then our next stream can be more fun,
Yeah,
short.
I was just
Like
thinking where are we at? Because I don't know if we will have time to actually finish this whole article like spot by
yeah,
spot. Do we want to?
definitely.
And I'd love to have some time for more focused questions and answers. Is there
Yeah.
do we want to do like because we've kind of been jumping around. Is
Mm-hmm.
there anything in this article that we've like haven't hit on at all?
Let's see. So I've kind of just been like scrolling down in order through like the major sections. I
But like
the next
we've
one,
also just
yeah,
kind of been like riffing like on stuff. If there's
as
anything,
it comes up.
yeah,
Yeah. Let's see here. I think a lot of these things are because the next like section is about just kind of like being strategic about like what skills you put to use. I feel like we've already kind of talked about that stuff.
hmm.
Um,
Oh, we should if we want to skip, we should totally skip to that website. Um,
uh, oh, the one about the disability
yeah,
discrimination cases.
that shit is wild.
Yeah. Oh God, where is that? It's in one of the sections where I talk about Americans with Disabilities Act lawsuits. Let's see. I think I talk about employers like gloating about it.
Yeah.
Okay, yes, here we go. Okay, so we've already talked about this that like you have to be really strategic about whether you're going to even disclose disability at work, even though you are supposedly legally protected from discrimination under laws like the Americans with Disabilities Act and other statutes. Unfortunately, and some people in the chat already talked about this, enforcement of these laws is almost non-existent. There's not, a cop you can call to report your employer for discriminating against you on a disability basis for. There's no the executive branch of the government and the police only enforce property laws. They don't enforce anti-discrimination laws.
Yep. Here, I can
Uh,
if we switch real quick, I can read out some of this stuff because it's just so
yeah. Oh, do you have it pulled up or should I
I
pull it up?
grabbed it.
Oh,
Um
okay, cool.
just the thing that I want to like almost screenshot is just like here's reassuring news. Most lawsuits under the ADA are won by employers. Um
Mm-hmm.
just the whole way that this is written is the most fucking corporate brained upsetting shit. Um uh Employers win almost all lawsuits involving the Americans with Disabilities Act, according to recent analysis. The study suggests that the ADA is not nearly the problem that employers and occupational health providers thought it would be, and some observers suggest that it was also means employers and providers are adhering to the law so well that only weak cases are taken to trial. Um, but it's just like I'm trying to find like some of the numbers show there is little to worry about. Like it's just so blatant in its tone of
Mm-hmm.
we are fucking workers so effectively that this law is basically useless.
Mm-hmm.
uh,
Yeah, it's good news, everybody. You don't have to worry about being sued for discriminating against. disabled employees.
Discriminate all
Like,
you want. Like
yep.
you're never gonna get taken to court.
Mm-hmm. The
um.
vast majority are won by employers.
Yep. Uh. Of 1,288 cases decisions on file with the American Bar Association, one party prevailed in 760 uh, cases, which is 63%. Um, leaving employees to prevail only 7.89% of the time,
Right.
as opposed to employers who prevailed 92% of the time, which is just staggering. It is.
Yep. And that's the people who were able to successfully pursue a case, which means these are the employees
Right.
who they had some kind of evidence, that they could move forward, because a lot of times this stuff is very subtle and it's hard to prove. And these are the people that had the money to hire a lawyer to pursue a disability
And
discrimination
time.
case, and the time
Yeah.
and the wherewithal, you know, and they still lost
Mm-hmm.
over 90% of the time. So when people talk about like the Americans with Disabilities Act, it's not. It's changed the landscape for disabled people in plenty of positive ways, but in this one, it is more. It's just led to a proliferation of people who work in HR to protect companies from suits,
Right.
so that they have this outcome. It hasn't actually protected employees, and I think it's
Um,
important to know that.
while the seemingly broad definition is of disabilities under the ADA is intended to cover almost anyone who might suffer job discrimination as the result of a disability, he says that the definition is full of catch-22s that often result in automatic dismissals before the cases can be heard on the merits. Employees usually lose their cases because of the six facets of the ADA: substantial limitation, otherwise qualified, collateral estoppel, the definition of employer, the burden of proof, and undue burden. So basically, he's just saying like it's purposefully broad so that a lot of people can pursue it, but because it just doesn't end up actually catch like nothing actually fits it.
Right. And there's no objective standard. So like when it comes to workplace protections under the ADA, you're supposed to make like you're supposed to be eligible for a job that with reasonable accommodations you could still do even if you have a disability. So what does it mean to have reasonable accommodations? What's unreasonable, you know?
Right.
So a lot of employers just make the case that they're like, well, we did this, and what do you expect us to completely change how we do business? They just say that it's too expensive for them.
Right.
And so then,
So
yeah,
and
it's not
all this
enough.
brings us back to all the things we've been talking about where you have to be defensive because the systems that are in place to protect you are ineffectual. The systems that are in place, they're either ineffectual or non-existent. Like this is, there we don't have a like retirement protections. Like so much stuff like that.
Yeah, yeah, and this is yet another reason why I caution people to really think about whether they even want to pursue a diagnosis if you're in the camp of you're autistic, you're self-identified, but you don't have documentation, and you think, okay, if I have a formal diagnosis, it'll protect me. It might not. It might just mean that your employer then knows something about you that's stigmatized, and you won't be able to actually have any recourse for it if they discriminate. There are plenty of reasons to, again, pursue diagnosis and pursue these things, but it's just unfortunately the case that it doesn't always shake out the way you think it's going to.
Yeah. Um. So I know we don't have tons more time. Do we want to do like some more specific Q&A stuff or
Sure, yeah, yeah. If people have any questions they want to put in the chat, or like any strategies that you've used in the workplace to kind of help make this stuff survivable, or ways that you've kind of just dealt with the question of how do I make it through in capitalism as a disabled person?
yeah.
Any questions people have? Yeah, and Lori's saying sometimes I wonder if it's a feature and not a bug. Yeah, I think it is a feature.
Yep, absolutely.
Bureaucracies slow things down, and they put a harsh filter on how many people will have the time and resources necessary to get their complaints heard. Um,
Yeah.
and so the more of those you put in place, the fewer people will get through, and that's by design, and it's predicated on this belief that disabled people are whiners and complainers who aren't trying hard enough and maybe are faking that they even have a disability.
Yep.
That's just how our disability benefit system and everything else works, and what a lot of people really believe,
And
unfortunately.
and and I think like specifics like the ADAs, like I don't think that it was intended to be a, intended to be a roadblock, but it's just like, it doesn't matter. That's what it gets whittled down into in actual implementation, and then people find ways to exploit all this stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and this is actually something that would be good to have Eric Garcia on to talk about, because he just because he writes a lot about like public policy and disability and stuff. It's like the ADA was like a pretty revolutionary piece of legislation at the time,
Right.
you know, but employers are still going to do everything they can to kind of slow it to a crawl.
Yeah.
But the movement to get it passed was really like inspiring. I think there's still a lot we can learn from disability activists in the 80s and 90s who got the ADA passed. Like they
Yeah.
just left all their wheelchairs like on the steps of the courthouse, and just left just display their bodies out there to kind of just show like when there's a lack of accessibility, we are still here, our
Yeah.
bodies are still here. And that shit was badass.
Uh, Panoli says, I talked about this with my psychologist. In my country, only psychiatrists can diagnose ADHD autism, and she was well meaning encouraging me to go for autism diagnosis, but also I started researching negatives in my country, and they are actually numerous, and she was oblivious to these. So I think it's important to always be aware. Even well-intentioned people usually have super limited knowledge on disability and what actually benefits you. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, that's a wider thing. Something I've experienced as a trans person, where it's like my doctors won't know. Like I'll know more than my doctors about trans healthcare, and it's like it's
Mm-hmm.
very unfortunate, but you you have to be your own advocate in so many of these
Mm-hmm.
cases.
Yeah. Yeah, and a lot of psychiatrists don't know much about the law. They don't know much about public policy except for how it directly affects them in their practice. So a lot of them won't even realize in a lot of countries you can't immigrate if you're autistic, or you can't be a refugee in a country, and those kinds of things. So unfortunately, that means you have to be aware of them yourself.
Yeah.
Um,
If your owner,
Eric's.
oh yeah, if your owner manager is hands off enough to not pay attention to day-to-day operations, just lie about unprovable things like, "We'll see." Last week I did this incredible thing for a customer client that nobody can actually look into. Yeah, and that kind of is like similar to the things we were talking about with like a resume. They're not going to check. Like same thing
Mm-hmm.
within a job. You know?
Yeah, leave yourself positive reviews on fucking Yelp and shit.
Hell yeah.
Like, oh yeah, this coworker, this employee was so helpful. I'll definitely be back. Like, Um, HHECT93 asked, do people generally have better luck getting accommodations for less stigmatized disabilities? I do encourage that as a almost like a test balloon at your work. So instead of saying I'm autistic and I need dimmer lights, uh, say like I get migraines and I need to be able to dim the lights in my office area, or I need to be able to work from home because sometimes I get these migraines, and I need to just be able to be in a quiet, dark environment. Um, and I don't say that because migraine sufferers always have a great time either. It's more the case that if they say no on the basis of a migraine, they were almost certainly going to say no on the basis of autism and start looking at you funny.
Yeah.
So, like allergies for, if you're sensitive to fragrances, yeah, things like that.
People,
If you can find, yeah,
neurotypical people might have a more of a baseline for um, having experienced that kind of stuff, which is shitty
right.
that like you have to rely on they can people only understand things they've actively experienced, but you know,
Yeah.
use it to your advantage.
Yeah, I think that's often a soft way to kind of not risk stigma as much. IBS is one that people, and I'm kind of surprised by this. Your mileage may vary, but whenever I ask for tips about how to like scam your way to like boundaries at work, people say, tell people that you have irritable bowel syndrome and that you need to run to the toilet a lot. Because then if people can't find you, they'll assume you're just shitting your guts out and they won't ask.
Yeah, nobody wants to ask follow up questions about that.
Right. Yeah. So and I don't want to say that to like downplay what it's actually like for people with IBS, and like I know people also don't take that seriously, but so many people have recommended that one, including people who actually do have IBS, that I think that's another good one to try. It's another one that's like common. It has many different causes. Like migraines, it's not as stigmatized. So,
Right. So we had a lot of good questions in here.
yeah. I also need to pee so bad.
Oh yeah, go for it. Sorry.
All right. So, yeah, why don't if you want to answer like one of the ones about like any ones that are relevant to your own experience while I
Absolutely.
do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sweet.
Me and Chad will hang out. I won't. I won't sit here and just talk shit. Um, Being trans and applying to jobs. I talked about this um, earlier, um, but one thing that I thought of that I have done is look for people with tattoos because I feel like there's some amount of equivalency there. Um, yeah, I and you're Ali Avocado was specifically asking about um, being like things becoming obvious, um, and that is definitely depending on where you're at. That is definitely a thing that could happen. Is as you move through your transition, it is likely to be more obvious, and you can't know in what ways it will be more obvious. Um, but you know, uh, honestly, what I did when I was early transition was I just like you know same advice we've been saying, hit the bricks. I like quit and went to a different job when I started presenting differently. Um, so I don't. Yeah, it really depends on the kind of business, and because you can hide it pretty well. Like people, even if people know that like can tell that you're trans and are like can tell that things are changing, like first of all people are so oblivious to that stuff, but also like they're not going to say anything. Like it's such a weird thing for somebody to bring up. It's really unlikely that they'll like actually bring it up.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely would co-sign switching jobs because it like people don't people don't shift very well like at all once they like have this locked in idea of you, but that's also useful for the if you start transitioning and you're worried people are going to be weird about it. It's like people have this idea of you locked in their minds, and they don't think much more deeply than that.
Yeah.
I've noticed.
And it's also like when you grow your hair out, nobody notices because it's like it doesn't change much day to day. So it's like even if you have like breasts that you didn't have last month, it changed so subtly. It's very unlikely that people will notice that.
Yeah, yeah, it's kind of wild how much, and people will like cis people have this thing where they like will ignore whatever features don't make you slot into whatever category they understand you as. Like people, you have this very like quick system of categorization, and so like they actually will just be like, "Oh, I just thought you were a woman who had a cold all the time and a beard and went to the men's room." Like, they're just like, it's really, which is shitty when you're trying to get someone to treat you the as your identity. But if you're trying to just like fly under the radar, a lot of times people, because it's like in cis people's brains, it's like such a bad, inoffensive thing to like be to like ask someone if they're trans or to like question those kinds of things, that it's like they won't even consider it as like a possibility a lot of the time. They're just,
Yeah,
which is you can kind of turn it to your advantage sometimes. Um,
absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah, I like everybody poops. It's true.
Mm-hmm.
Lori, my name is Madeline. Hi, producer Madeline.
Yes. Yes. We don't have the blinky tags on right now because we've been like more serious today.
Here we go.
Yes. Keep that MFN thing on you. Abby, how do you deal with asking for accommodations if you've been at working for a job over a year? It depends. Like if you're at the kind of company that has HR, you might want to kind of. It really depends on who you trust to be what minimum level of non obnoxious. Like if you think HR at your company is at least going to do the kind of like bare minimum cover their ass kind of stuff, then you might want to go to them and just say like, here's the situation. Or if your manager has so far been decent to you, then you might want to float out the test balloon of like, here's the thing that I need now. But again, it's all about being strategic. Like, do you want to come out to anyone at work about specifically being autistic? Do you have specific asks that you can just ask for, such as I need to work from home because of personal health things, and I have a note from a doctor that can vouch for that. That's one strategy. It really depends on the nature of the ask you want to make, and who you're going to be asking, and how much of a shitbag they are. But it's definitely going to be basically like framed, I think, as I have this medical issue going on. I have this personal kind of, and I have a doctor's note, I have a psychologist's note explaining that I need this flexibility. And here's specifically what it is that I need, and a note attesting to that. Um, and even if you do all of those things great, you still may not get it. But that would be kind of strategically how to go about it. And my partner just got out of the toilet, so now I'm going to actually go to that.
Yeah, good luck to your son, Lori. I really hope that works out. Um, it shouldn't ever. Of course, it should not should not be a question. We should not have to deal with these things. We should not have to be, you know, so defensive in the ways that we've been describing. Um, but yeah. And again, thank you so much for everybody who's come out. This has been such a great stream, and I'm excited to. We're gonna try to do a lot more and a lot of different things. So if anyone has any ideas of how what they would like to see from these streams, or anything, if there was any, I'll ask again. Make sure that the volumes have been good, because I have been. It's kind of difficult for me to check that during. Um, but yeah. Lori, absolutely, we will have subscriptions eventually. That's the plan. We do have to be. We have to like have like an average of viewers or something like that, like a certain average of viewers for so many streams for so many days. But we have been doing great in that regard, so hopefully we will be good on that. Um, yeah, disclose as little as possible. Even the best companies will fuck you over because of the way the capitalism works. Yeah, even the best people will not advocate for you as much as you need. And yes, definitely air horn sounds. will be happening.
Yes. Whew. Hell yeah. Whew. So do we feel like we're at a good wind down
Yeah, yeah,
point? Yeah. Cool. Yeah, ended up. Uh, I mean, I know it's always the case that it's like there's always so much to talk about that it's like not gonna actually get through
yeah. But
everything. It'd be like too content heavy, but
I love all of the things that we talked about. And I think the biggest question mark was definitely like what the audience is going to be like, and it was like
mm-hmm,
couldn't ask for better audience and better comments. So thank you everybody to
mm-hmm,
come out that came out. Somebody asked
yeah,
while you're gone. Somebody asked if we were gonna have subscriptions to financially support, and I said as soon as we can. That's kind of the plan. So um,
yeah, yeah. And if you have any like I left a little suggestion box here in my profile.
oh, perfect.
So if people have like things that they want to see or like topics they want to hear discussed, you guys can leave it there, or you can leave it in the chat. Um, can't have subs if everyone is banned. Oh yes, Eric, you're gonna just thwart our whole shit. But yeah, I think we'd like to continue just like talking about different kinds of like serious topics, but also shit posting and internet culture and shit like that. So maybe the next one we'll do is a little bit more. We'll fold in more like silliness, but
Yeah, I like the idea of
yeah,
going back and forth, and that's fun.
yeah, yeah. Because I feel like once like when I think of this topic, I'm like, oh yeah, talking about how to scam at work. That's great. That's fun. But then when it's like, no, we're talking about the realities of how horrible capitalism is. It is
Yeah.
kind of a fucking bummer. As fun as stealing things from work is also. Would love to see more about re-entering the workforce later on. Oh, thank you, Chubby Kumquat, for trying out Twitch for the first time. I know it's like it's always hard to get people to like go to a new
Yeah,
app, website, whatever. So it's always really nice when people take the time to do that.
it's our first experience streaming, so we're
Yeah, yeah. Stream about furries and other niche internet subcultures. Fuck yeah.
yep,
Honestly, yes,
absolutely.
I'd love that. Yes. Oh my god.
That's definitely where our interests are both like.
Da-da-da-da-da. And honestly, like I'm going to Furfest in like 2 weeks. So
Oh my god, that would be a fun stream. Is literally just like a recap stream for that. You always are so
mm-hmm,
good about taking videos, so and like pictures and videos and stuff, and we could just have those up and you
mm-hmm.
could talk about it. That would be very fun.
That would be cool. Hell yeah. Yeah, I might even just like go live on Instagram or from the app on here of just
Yes.
do a little walkthrough
Yeah.
of Furfest as well to give people a flavor because it's just amazing.
All right. Well, we should dip out. Thank you everybody so much for coming out. Um, yeah.
Yeah, thank you everyone. And the VOD, the recording of this will be on Twitch for like 2 weeks, and I'll also rip it and put it on YouTube as well. So
Yep.
if you missed anything or you want to share it with anyone,
Yeah, and
it'll be there.
stay tuned for we don't have anything planned, but we do want to be doing these regularly in some capacity, and then hopefully, yeah. All right,
Yeah, sweet. All right.
bye everybody.
Bye. Bye. Thank you everyone.